I only ride a longboard now. I can't.
I would like to see that video.
I follow him like a giraffe learning to walk.
Okay, everybody ready? I know we're
Presentation,
time constrained, so
over,
I'd like to call the order, the workshop for August 28, 2018. If we could please stand for the pledge and invocation and pledge. Amen.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate Amber Mariano being here, and I understand that Mr. Bilirakis will be here shortly. And I appreciate everyone else being here. It's the reason we're kind of shuffling around is it's important to me that we're all together on this. I would love to have us all sitting at this table, but it sounds like we can't make it work for today. This will not be the last meeting. This will be the first of many meetings that we have together as one. We've always operated, in my opinion, in separate silos. We wouldn't be here today if we all don't care about our community and others, and that's what this is about. And it's important to me, again, that we are all together. So I apologize we're not all together at the table today, but I can assure you, speaking for this board, we are all together. I don't want to get into us being in last place, whatever place we're in, but we're not in a good place. I'm not okay with it, this board's not okay with it, and I know each of you are not okay with it. This is the day that we need to work together to make change, see what we can all do differently, because obviously what we're doing isn't working. And I challenge each of you through today to look at those things and see together what we can do. And that's really what it's about, and it's great to have, so from the state here, I believe, is any of the aides here, like for Mr. Burgess or Senator Simpson, do we know? Ralph, okay. But I know that they couldn't make it because we kind of gave them a little bit of a not enough notice. Next time we will. But we know that this is a county problem, a state problem, a federal problem, and I hate to say problem, let's say opportunity. And we are going to be able to see this number increase, period. It has to, and it will. So I just want to thank everybody for the time. Again, I apologize. Thanks, Judge Crane and David and Monica. Sorry we can't get you all here at the table, but next time, if it's 3 months from now, you will all be at the table because we really are one. So thank you. And with that, if I could go ahead and pass it over to Kim.
Great, thank you. First, I want to thank you, Commissioners, for having us here today at the table, and also to our esteemed colleagues in the field. We all work together, as Commissioner Wells said. It's important for us to have a plan of action, and we need to come up with that. As he said, we work in silos. Silos don't effectively result in anything. I've been in this field for a while, and the difficulty is with opioid addiction, it's not something we can get rid of completely because there are people who need opioids. We all know someone who's suffering from cancer or someone who's using these drugs in the effective, proper way, but we also know someone that's abusing them. So to take them off the market completely is not even an option. What we need to do is find a way to prevent the abuse while still serving the public that needs the opioid drugs. And that's a difficult thing to do. So what we've done together is bring together the experts in our field locally to speak to the commissioners today and everyone else, other dignitaries that are here, to go over what they're doing currently and what we can do together as a team in the future. So we have today 6 different speakers. They're each going to have about 15 minutes to go over their presentation. We're going to go around the table. They'll each come up and speak. After they're done, they'll go back to that table. If you have any questions for them, please feel free to ask. I ask that you keep the questions to a very minimal time frame because of time constraints. And then at the end, we can kind of bring whoever back to the table if you have questions. So the first speaker today is going to be Captain Mike Jenkins from the Pasco County Sheriff Office. He is here to represent the Sheriff's Office programs to address the opioid epidemic. And Captain Mike?
Very good. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to come here today. I'll be brief with the introduction so that we can jump in. I know that your time is very valuable. So I've been asked to talk about two things. Number one, give a snapshot of what's occurring within our county from a law enforcement perspective. So we're going to go through, we're going to look at some data here in just a moment. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about the second thing briefly as well, just to let you know what to expect. Second thing that we're going to be talking about is some of the things that the Pasco Sheriff's Office has been involved in order to address this epidemic. And so those are going to be the two areas that we're looking at. If you look at your first page, one of the data points that I thought would be particularly helpful is to look at our overdose cases for the last 2 years, particularly starting in January of 2017 through now. And here's what's interesting. Most of us know that through 2016 and before, as we were seeing the rest of the country experiencing the opioid epidemic, we were not experiencing the same problems at Manatee County. We just simply weren't. But all of a sudden in 2017, we started to notice it started to creep into our area to the point in 2017 where our overdose deaths and opioid-related deaths reached the same levels that it did back in 2010 during the pill epidemic. And so if you look at this chart, you'll notice in the red, right, that's up until July of this year. And then you'll see the blue line, that's all of last year. You'll notice that there is actually a significant increase in overdoses, reported overdoses, that the Sheriff's Office and our EMS have been responding to over the past year and a half. And it continues to increase. So there's been a rapid increase. If you look at the next page, we're looking at all overdoses by outcome. So the last slide that we looked at simply talked about overdoses. That include overdoses that ended in death and overdoses that did not end in death. This page that you're looking at now with the blue line and the red line shows the number of overdoses in blue and the number of overdoses that resulted in death in red. Now, here's one bright spot that I think that we can talk about in the midst of these terrible statistics, and that's this. Although the number of overall overdoses has gone up significantly, the number of overdose deaths has increased slightly. We're tracking about 5 ahead of where we were at the same time last year. Now again, certainly we still have issues. We have issues that need to be resolved. That's why we're all here together today. We'll talk about why I think that maybe although the overdoses have increased significantly, why the overdose deaths have not increased in kind. If you turn to your next page, we try to utilize our resources based upon the data that is available. And what is concerning, and I think what really validates an earlier statement, which is we weren't experiencing the opioid epidemic here in Pasco County in 2015 and even 2016. Hit us hard in 2017. We're continuing to get hit hard in 2018. Statistics here show that in 2018, 67% of the overdoses are related to heroin or fentanyl. And so I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about, right, so heroin and fentanyl are two of the primary opioids that we're experienced with illicit narcotics use. In the past, when fentanyl first came out, it was the hidden killer, right? People were taking fentanyl, they were putting it in the heroin in order to increase the high. People were not accustomed to that, they were overdosing, some were dying. As time has progressed, the addicts out on the street have realized that fentanyl actually produces a different kind of high that is stronger to the person who has a strong addiction to heroin. We actually have addicts on the street now that are not interested in heroin, they want 100% fentanyl. And so we're starting to see, an increase in this opioid addiction cycle, and it's very, very dangerous. We've also found one of the difficulties that we have at the Sheriff's Office, it's very taxing on the resources. So we have individuals who are being arrested, they're addicts, they go into the jail, they begin to experience symptoms, obviously, of not having access, to that drug, and so they start experiencing withdrawal symptoms. And throughout that process, what happens, oftentimes, we have a medical protocol that will help them get through that process. They get clean, they then go back out on the street, and a lot of them are shooting up the heroin and fentanyl at the exact same level than when they came in. That's what's leading to a lot of the overdoses as well, because there's a tolerance level that is associated with that. Next slide. We've created a heat map here. And really, this heat map, I think, is really informative. It's not only informative for the Pasco Sheriff's Office, but it's informative for all of the individuals here today, because it helps us to really define where are these problems at. And one of the things that you will notice immediately is that it is that US 19 corridor, really from county line to county line. That is where we are experiencing the vast majority of our overdoses and our overdose deaths. And so I referred to why I think that although the overdoses are increasing significantly, the overdose deaths have not increased in kind. I think one of the reasons why that is occurring is because of the deployment of Narcan. So many of you know that the Pasco Sheriff's Office in March of 2017, our sheriff made a decision that all of our law enforcement personnel were going to receive training and actually receive Narcan. In 2017, there were 44 deployments that interacted and saved lives. In 2018, right here we are, at the end of August, we've had 43 deployments. So we've got several more months to go. We're seeing an increase in the type of deployments. Obviously, EMS is doing it, and we're finding that Narcan availability to your average citizen is also leading to people whose lives are being saved. We spoke to somebody recently that we arrested in reference to dealing these death drugs. And this individual advised that he himself has actually been revived 20 times by narcotics.
This is a dealer? A dealer?
So can I ask a question? Not just say, okay, this isn't gonna hurt me because I can revive myself, so it's not just
Yeah.
ending cycle?
You know, it's interesting. We've had the opportunity, Judge Crane and ASAP have set up panels where we've had an opportunity to discuss with the community. We had a former recovering addict, and that recovering addict said this. He said, look, don't apply logic to the addict that you yourself would have as a non-addict. With that being said, there's no doubt that they are fully aware. Now, what's happening is they're going to take the drug regardless of whether or not Narcan is available. We're finding that the Narcan is just saving lives and is providing additional opportunities for these people to turn their lives around. I don't know that it empowers them per se to continue to use that drug because the addict mind does not go, you know, I don't have Narcan, I'm going to hold off on taking my fentanyl today. But again, certainly it increases in some ways the comfortability. I just don't know that there's any other option because we value life, and so we're going to continue to
Oh, yeah.
the program.
Commissioner Moore.
So a question, and Judge Crane may have to jump in on this one too. So you just triggered something when you said the dealer had overdosed 20 times. Why is that dealer on the street still? So I guess that's the question, is how many, for example, that person, so we have the people that are abusing the drugs and stuff, the ones that, you know, sincerely, and I'm saying this guy doesn't need help too.
Sure.
People that need help, right? But we have this person that's out there affecting all these lives on a day-to-day basis because of what they're doing to make money. I know sometimes they're making it for their habit at the same time, so they're making money to make money.
Sure.
So how many times is this person released? How many times has this person gone to court? How many times has this person been in jail before they actually set foot in prison?
So this person that we've actually arrested has spent a significant amount of time in jail in the past, is an addict, deals in order to support that, and based upon some recent charges, will be returning back to prison for a significant amount of time. As far as, it's a problem. I can tell you that I oversee the Special Investigations Division, and so while all the Sheriff's Office law enforcement personnel conduct narcotics investigation, my area is responsible for the advanced investigations. So what we have done, based upon this data, we have reprioritized our investigations. And so we are conducting advanced investigations that are targeting sources and supply into the Pasco County area. Now, it's not prudent for me to talk a whole lot more about that, just simply because we don't want to jeopardize the nature of those investigations.
Well, of course.
Yes.
So I guess let me be a little more general then. Judge Crane, you can jump into on this one. How much do they have to hold to be charged with a felony?
Well, if they sell any amount of a controlled substance, it's a felony. It's a second-degree felony.
So
And
when
then
we
it
get
goes
to the
up from
point
there to
where it's higher-
trafficking amounts, and if you have an over an ounce of cocaine, for instance, that's a trafficking amount. And the more you have, the higher the punishment and the penalty is.
Right.
To answer the first part of your question, if I could, what happens is our goal in the treatment court and drug court is we can take that person who's dealing to support their habit, as Captain Jenkins has referred to, and then our job is to get that person out of their habit. And therefore, we kind of take a dealer off the street, we take someone out of custody, and then and remember, these people are seen on a regular basis by me, drug screened and that sort of thing. And if appropriate, they're put right back over, in Land O'Lakes if it's appropriate under the circumstances. So we try to take a balanced approach to that and have the opportunity to give someone their life back that they didn't already have. As indicated, once again by Captain Jenkins, point well made, they don't wake up and say, gee whiz, I think I'm going to really not use today because Narcan's not available, or I think I'm going to get caught or whatever. They just you know, they're in this vicious cycle, and that cycle rules their lives.
And I can appreciate that, you know, I guess.
But and if I could, there does certainly come a point in time that these folks need to be held accountable and responsible for what they're doing to our community. Let's make no mistake about that.
Right, because without them, there wouldn't be all the users.
Right.
Right? So, you know, I mean, holding these people accountable, they're actually out there dealing, especially in these mass quantities. It's very, you know, we'll talk about it more today, but it's gonna be very difficult to help a lot of these people when they have access. And these people are the ones that are giving them access.
Yeah, we provide that. What we have found, though, is that the problem that we're experiencing, we don't really view, certainly there's a supply issue, and that's a concern. But in reality, it's the need, it's the addicts that drive it. So what we have found is that as we arrest prolific drug dealers who are involved in dealing fentanyl and other opiates and other drugs that lead to overdoses and overdose deaths, that void fills very quickly, simply because it is very, very profitable. One of the things, and
Not all dealers are users.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So one of the things that we do, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but you know, we look for strategic partnerships, and so we have task force agents on both the DEA and FBI, and we are constantly evaluating whether or not it's appropriate to take some of these prolific, violent drug dealing offenders who are not necessarily users, although some potentially can be, and if in fact the federal system is going to provide us more bang for our buck, then we're going to go ahead and do that. So if I can get a trafficking amount of heroin along with the possession of a gun, that's a 15-year min-min. And so we're constantly looking at what is going to give us the best bang of the buck in order to bring the highest level of accountability to the people who are directly responsible for providing these drugs and quite frankly leading to the deaths of many, many people.
And those folks are the folks that don't come to drug court. They don't ever make it in.
Which is good.
I want to make sure we're clear on that.
Right. So.
And so what I think you'll probably find if we turn to the next page is
Captain Representative Mariano had a question.
Here's a quick one. I was doing a ride along a couple weeks ago, maybe months ago, and they had to use Narcan on someone as we're watching. Now, that person really tried to resist use of Narcan because it was going to take away their high. Is that something that you see often, or usually it's past the point where they have any knowledge of what's going on?
generally the deployment of Narcan is utilized when people are unresponsive and they are in respiratory distress. So that's a little unusual, I think, with the situation you experience. One of the beautiful things about Narcan is that you can utilize it on anyone, even if they're not experiencing symptoms of an overdose or an opioid-related overdose. It's not going to harm them. And so there are going to be times where a deputy's not sure exactly what's occurring. If he thinks that there's a potential there's an opioid overdose that's occurring, he can deploy that Narcan in order to relieve some of the symptoms that are occurring. But that's actually, from my experience, somewhat rare. Usually it's deployed when people are in significant respiratory distress.
As far as the access to Narcan, can you go over that? Because I was told, in this town, Tati would get access to Narcan.
Yeah, Florida statute was passed where it is no longer, prescription is not required any longer to have access. So there are giveaway programs. I know at some of the ASAP events, there have been Narcan that is available that is given for free out to the public. People can generally go to any Walgreens or CVS and purchase the Narcan. So the availability, yes, the availability is it's very accessible.
How
It's somewhat
expensive
costly.
is it?
Yeah.
How expensive is it? Because I thought, I was under the impression that it was given away even at the CVS and the Walgreens, what have you. How expensive
So
is it?
last time I checked, and I'm certainly open to anyone here correcting me, but I had seen $75 for 2 doses. Expensive.
And so, is it one time use? I don't know if it's in it.
Yes, ma'am. One-time use. So you utilize it and then dispose.
And Congressman Bill Rackus, we appreciate you being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
And let me just update the board. I know Captain Jenkins talking about 44 deployments of Narcan that he's used last year. Some numbers from our fire team. They administered 853 last year. So think about that. Let that sink in. I mean, we're talking about you all use, we've got 853, which I thought was interesting, where over 50% of that is the majority 50 or above, most of that majority is over 70,
Yeah.
which is interesting. I would think it would be a younger demographic, but it's really folks over 50, but that's,
It's significant.
huge number.
So one of the reasons why we deployed it, ordinarily, right, that is a life-saving measure that's by EMS. But there is the occasion where we get there first. And so seconds can count, and that's why
absolutely,
we.
no, you should.
That's what. As you have the different speakers come up today, I think that you're probably going to find that all of the proposed actions or actions that are currently being taken are going to probably fall into these 4 categories, right? And people may have different names for them, but prevention and education, that's significant, right? Treatment, you have people who are addicts and they need help, they need treatment. Intervention, those are people who obviously are addicts and they need someone, somehow to intervene to help get them on the right path. And then finally, obviously, recovery. Those are people who were addicts, they've gone through treatment, and now they're in a continual state of recovery to make sure that they do not regress back into that problem behavior. And so at the Pasco Sheriff's Office, like many of the other agencies here in Pasco County, we recognize that the Pasco County Sheriff's Office cannot solve this problem alone. We cannot arrest our way out of the opioid epidemic. It's just simply not practical, it's not cost effective, and it's just not realistic. Certainly there is an important law enforcement component, and we've discussed that already briefly. However, we need to look at the full gamut of the treatment, of the recovery, of the intervention, and the education. And so one of the things that we've done at the Pasco Sheriff's Office is we partner with the faith-based community, and we have a Celebrate Recovery program in the jail. And that's where individuals getting access to faith-based resources to help get them in the right direction, provide them with the resources, and then of course when they get out, the idea is that they continue to partner with those faith-based organizations to get the support and the encouragement and the resources needed to continue on a productive path in society. Another strategic partnership that we have is with BayCare. So we started a program about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, called CARE. And that's Citizens Addiction Recovery Effort. And here's what we do. In the Special Investigations Division, when we're conducting a search warrant and we know that this is a trap house or an area where there's going to be a lot of addicts, we will actually have a counselor from BayCare come with us. When we implement that search warrant, they'll be at a safe location. As soon as that location is secure and it is safe, we will tell them where that location is. They will then come, and immediately at the person's lowest point, we begin to introduce them to resources and other avenues that are available to help get them out of this destructive pattern that they have found themselves in. Another partnership is with Pasco County Schools. So we have Pasco County School Board member Steve Lucart here today in the back. I've had the privilege of having many breakfasts with Steve and a group of other individuals, and these are just concerned community members who say, hey, we need to make an impact. You know, just recently ASAP held a student advisory board council where we put students up and they were the panel and people asked them questions. And one of the things that came out of that was, you know, we appreciate Red Ribbon Week, we appreciate some of the things that are trying to be done, but they're just not as impactful as I think you guys think they are. And so one of the things that we're looking at, and Steve Lucart is looking at and putting forth a proposal, is to see if we can't bring in some motivational speakers into the schools to address these kids in a way that has significant impact. So one of the people that we've identified that we hope to do this first round is an individual by the name of Alton Voss. Some of you maybe remember. He was a 3rd-star recruit out of Grove High School. He went on full scholarship to USF. He ended up becoming addicted to pain pills. He lost his scholarship, stole a vehicle, was arrested. I mean, his life was a mess. He's turned it around. And what he does now is he goes around. He actually just did an NFL combine, was not selected, but he's playing pro overseas in Europe. He's going to come back, and our hope is that we're going to have him, Wolf High School, football star, opioid addict, disgraced in the media, come back and tell a story of redemption and give some warnings to the kids, because we believe that those types of interactions are going to have significant
They
impact.
look up to them.
So partnering with ASAP and partnering with Steve.
Leaf does that too. You know, he's not from Pasco. You're gonna mention him? Maybe we may have a contact.
Yeah, very good.
To get in touch with Brian.
And so we're working on trying to develop some private funding as well, meeting with people within the community to say, hey, you know, we want to give these people fees for coming and taking the time, and we want it to be comprehensive. So we're in the process, and Steve and his group has taken significant effort to raise private fees in order to apply the funding necessary to have these kind of impactful statements, right? These are not people that are in crisis. We want to get them at an early stage.
That's good, because Gary and I, we had that same conversation about the kids. You'll probably talk about it too, in the schools. That's good.
Well, and talk about impactful statements, I can tell you, when I used to get paddled by Mr. Lucard, it was very impactful. So I just want to throw that out there.
That's good.
Yeah, hey, I did okay.
And I appreciate it. So this is actually, because they're not on the agenda, Kevin, on your team real quick. So Chairman Wells, I want to read his statement here again. Talked about some numbers. 533 patients, 62% of those were 50 or older, with the majority being over 70 that received Narcan. So that's a little disconcerting, that number of people over the age of 70. I'm going to only make an assumption here, and I could be wrong in my assumption. Do you think that is because of mismanagement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, those kind of numbers have always existed in just the elderly people filling their own little daily boxes, taking too many of medication. So that has always existed. It's just now coupled with the addicted people who are now, so that's why our numbers, and that number of where the combined number, it was 800, I forget what you said, Commissioner, Chairman, about the 800 numbers. It's a combination of his. So if we run on a patient, we track his number and count it as prior to our arrival in that patient care report.
Not
So,
saying they're not addicted, but at the same time, it's more mismanagement.
yeah, most of it is about mismanagement.
So that's when we have these conversations, continue to have these conversations. Education needs to be a big part of it, obviously, because if this is happening to these seniors that are 70 years old, there needs to be a larger education factor built into, I guess, our message going forward. Also, how many are they being prescribed? So if they're being overprescribed, which I know people are still being overprescribed, and I think we all know that, how can we tackle that? So if you have a senior that's getting, 160 oxys a month, that's a death wish waiting to happen.
Right. So for us, we're more of a reactionary type force.
I know you are.
Right. But we're trying to do so. Like with the sheriff's office, we are. If we give Narcan to somebody, we're leaving the Narcotics Anonymous information with the family member and or the patient, depending upon the situation that they leave the house with. But we are getting to the point that we go to calls. Narcan's either been given by the sheriff's office, most likely those are the ones that happens to, and then they want to sign a refusal and not go to the hospital. Right? So there's wherever there's a pathway of resistance, if you will, to get the help, so it's just about repetitive. Here's another flyer. Here's another flyer. Eventually, we are hoping that somebody takes that message. But what you're talking about of making sure they never got to that point in the first place but for us, giving that the opioids. So some people would say that we shouldn't, and we've talked about it always has a place and it needs to exist. We run about 47,000 medical calls a year, or this past year actually, and of them, 42,000 of them were pain-generating type calls. So it could have been just a scratch, a sprain, whatever, all the way up to gunshot wounds. And we only gave a opioid 1,000 times, right? So I think that there was a gap of us not supplying any medication for a lot of people who were in some sort of pain, only as a reaction to a crisis that we saw happening, and we didn't want to start adding on top of it. But so now that we have these other alternatives that are rolling out this month, we'll be able to assist those people and give them an option.
Yeah, the thing is, on the federal, do you mind?
No, go ahead.
On the federal level, we allocated, we appropriated quite a few millions of dollars to purchase Narcan, but we got to make sure that people have access to it. And we've got to make sure that people have access to it. And you said that it's available at the sheriff's office for free? No. Okay, where is it available for free? I mean, yes.
So I can answer a little bit of that. So the individual companies will have a process in which people can apply for it for free. So if you're indigent, you don't have insurance, and you make less than $100,000 a year, a person can fill out a paper form, fax it to the manufacturer. So, and Evzio would be one of them, and then they are then shipped the item at no cost. The trick is, not everyone has access to a printer or a fax machine, so it is a bit of a lengthy process, but a really cool opportunity to partner with those companies to expedite that process.
Yeah. Okay. The other, I just wanted to add something to what you said with regard to the seniors. The high-risk seniors that are taking opioids, we passed legislation, actually it was my legislation, to mandate a lock-in program. Now, we got to be careful, folks, because I hear from my constituents on a regular basis. I'm sure you do too, Jack, and Amber, where they're not getting their pain medication. And that's a big problem too. So, but this lock-in program will apply to high-risk seniors. So they will lock in a couple pharmacies, maybe up north, one up north, two down here, so that we can keep track, the pharmacies can keep track, so we can eliminate some of this pharmacy shopping. And frankly, doctor shopping. And that's not going to alleviate the problem completely, but I think it will be helpful. But we've got to get back to the Narcan. We've got to make sure. I mean, filling out the application, I guess is similar to the 340B program, where if they can't afford to get it, they apply for it. But I think, since we've appropriated these funds, we've got to make sure people have access to it.
Sorry, I did have another way people can get Narcan. There are a few, DCF is contracting with a few nonprofits in the state. So I think we have a few in like Bradenton, but they get shipments of Narcan that they can give out for free as they so choose. So that could be another opportunity to look into partnership with DCF.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah, that's
So,
a good
Mr.
way to
Chairman,
do it.
So just back to my point I was making earlier, is that we're trying to come up with solutions here, right? So we're talking about the seniors. That needs to be part of the conversation, in my opinion, going forward, whether we involve the area aging, because obviously there's an education factor. People are mismanaging their medications. That's a problem, and they need to be included in the talks. Again, remember, we're trying to find solutions here today, so that has to be, I think, part of the solutions.
Very good to kind of piggyback off that, Commissioner Moore. One of the things that we recently implemented, we're in the process of implementing, we've developed a partnership with HIDA. That's high-intensity drug trafficking areas. That's out of Washington, D.C. Yes. Basically what they have something what's called OD map. And what we would like to implement, we're going to need to partner with Fire Rescue to discuss the best way to do this, but is implementing overdose data inside of a database real time, so that we can begin to start having real-time data involving overdose activity. So that's helpful. So I've showed you some heat maps. That's delayed, right? That's usually about a month or so behind, just because the analysts need to crunch the numbers and develop the maps. OD map has an opportunity through mobile phones. Members of the Sheriff's Office and Fire Rescue can actually enter in the overdose data, and it can immediately go in, and then we can have a snapshot, real time, about what kind of overdoses are occurring, what drugs are involved. And I think that the implementation of that, if we can get widespread usage and come up with a great policy between the Sheriff's Office and Fire Rescue on how that's going to be implemented, that's going to be helpful, because we're going to be able to deploy resources appropriately based upon real-time data. And so that's something that we recently signed an agreement we're working through, and we're going to be sitting down with Fire Rescue to discuss exactly what that's going to look like.
I'm curious, looking at that map, a lot of it's in my district, and it's here.
That one should be fine. The spider mic should be fine.
So I'm wondering if, as you're mapping, I mean, are there certain residences that have high incidence of calls to certain residences, and how?
There are.
And I think of Leisure Lane.
Sure.
And, I saw it happening myself when I first found Leisure Lane. So what are we doing to be proactive about places where this is occurring?
Yeah, indeed. So we've actually identified residences where there have been upwards of 4 or 5 overdoses that have actually occurred. And so those homes become an investigative priority. we target those homes, we arrest individuals out of those homes. That's pretty common. The difficulty is that when you have a suppressed area like Leisure Lane, again, we'll arrest people, they'll go to jail, some of them will go to prison, and then there are other individuals who will move right in and continue the same type of behavior.
So, we were working with the sheriff on a rental registry, and I know the sheriff gave us a model ordinance for a rental registry, and one of the premises in that registry was to hold the landlord accountable for the actions occurring in his property. And our rental registry is a little stalled, but I know the sheriff is very much like to see that reform, as I would. But I do think that when you have someone who's has property that's being used like this, I think they should be held responsible.
If they allow it to continue, if they're aware of it and they allow it to continue.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, we've got a relationship with the drug court, so Judge Crane is going to talk about that. Pasco ASAP, we've got Monica here who's representing, again, there's already a lot going on, so I know that it's tempting for us sometimes to look at this epidemic, look at the numbers, recognize that it's growing, and there's a temptation sometimes to think, hey, nothing's being done. And here's what I can tell you, there's actually a lot that's being done. With that being said, we need to improve. We need to continue to be teachable. We need to continue to explore other opportunities so that we can get better. But I can tell you this with a relative high level of certainty, and that is, if we did not have the efforts that were currently going on, I'm convinced it would be worse.
Yeah.
I really do believe that. And finally, I talk about our strategic partnerships. Again, I mentioned the FBI and the DEA before. Again, we at the Sheriff's Office are constantly looking. We want to hold these people to the highest level of accountability. And there are times we're not taking it through the state system for our prolific drug offenders who are dealing heroin and fentanyl. We can get minimum mandatories for very dangerous individuals in order to take them out of society so that they will not continue to be involved in this very dangerous activity. A couple of other things that we're doing that's very intentional. I referred to this earlier. We have advanced investigative efforts that are focused on source and supply. So while certainly, right, the users are an issue, focused our efforts, particularly from the Special Investigations Division, on the dealers and the source and supply. We've got some really good things cooking with that. Currently, we do have in-house tracking of overdoses, but it's not as comprehensive as ODs. I get an email every overdose, every single overdose the Sheriff's Office responds to. My area and my chain of command, we get an overdose and we begin to evaluate it. We look at it for raw data, but also for investigative opportunities as well. I know that the Congressman had mentioned about all of the funds that are available. We're pursuing hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants from the federal government in order to support our efforts, particularly from a law enforcement perspective. Another thing that we've done, we've created a PSO addiction guide that we hand out to people who are in the jail and also to people who are out on the streets. And that just introduces them to resources that are available that can assist them with their recovery, with their treatment, and so on and so forth. And then finally, one of the things that we've done recently, we're talking about this workshop, and hey, let's all get together and let's figure out what the great ideas are. I'll tell you, some of the best ideas are stolen ideas. Those are ideas that we can get from other jurisdictions. So we've actually started reaching out to other jurisdictions who have experienced this at a higher level and say, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What's been successful? What's not been successful? And that's how we found out about OD MAP and a variety of other things. One of the things I learned during a recent conversation is that EMS, it sounds like our EMS is already doing it, which is wonderful, but they have a big red paper that says this: we just saved your life. Please take a look at the information enclosed and get help. And then they have a series of different things that are available, right? It's designed to have an impact on the people that will just revive from the Narcan process. And so I think that when we talk about solutions, I think part of that solution is obviously roundtabling, but also reaching out to other areas to find out what are they doing, where they're having success, to see if we can steal or borrow those ideas and apply them specifically here to Pasco. As I said before, and this is my last slide here, this is not strictly a law enforcement issue. We know that we cannot arrest our way out of the problem, and we are fully aware that the Pasco Sheriff's Office, and even as individuals who are coordinating together on this issue, that if we really want to be effective, we absolutely have to have a comprehensive, multidisciplinary, strategic, and coordinated response. So I would just like to say thank you for the opportunity to come and just give you a basic overview, talk about some of the things that the Pasco Sheriff's Office is doing, but also these types of conversations help facilitate the breaking down of silos, coming together, and being more unified in our response as a county. And I'd like to thank you for that.
And Captain Jenkins, that's, to me, that's what it's about to this board. That's what it's about. It's not that we're not doing anything.
Sure, indeed.
And I don't think anybody's ever said that, but you talk about funding, and I know the state set aside $53 million, just for example, and we need to all be together with that. If we're going to apply for something, we should be applying together, not you applying and then, Monica applying and then Judge, we need to work stronger together. I mean, I can relate it to homelessness. We've all been meeting, all the boards have met with the Florida Homeless Coalition from the state. They're coming in, meeting with every silo to help us deal with this opportunity. And they were able to take Sarasota and get the population down 50%. It's the same thing here, and I would love to see something like that happen here.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's us forming a task force as a county to work with other counties that have been successful with wherever they're at, so we can continue to address this, because again, this isn't something we're going to be sitting down once a year talking about. This needs something it's top of mind for all of us. We need to continue. We need to track. We need to hold each other accountable. So thank you for everything your team's doing, but I just know we all can do more, and I know we will, or we wouldn't be here. So,
Yes, thank you very much, sir.
Commissioner Mariano.
Yeah, just a quick thought. Captain,
I agree. I know we do have to keep moving. Go ahead, Commissioner.
greatly appreciate you being here, your insights, and Gary Angel, I'm delighted you're here. I mean, I think your conversation started this whole meeting to happen, so I appreciate your being here. 'Cause
Absolutely, yeah.
I want to touch on, and Congressman Bilirakis, you're being here too. What I want to throw is for kind of a thought, and I don't care if I can answer right away, but I want you to think about this. We know how bad these opioids are for being addictive, okay? They're allowed to be legal. When I look at the danger that our police, our first responders do, and the paramedics as well, the danger they're in with these people on these drugs that aren't unconscious, that you're reviving, how dangerous it is for these people compared to if more people were on medical marijuana. And when I look at the percentage of people that are over the age of 50 years old, I can't imagine these guys going on the street looking for these drugs until they get started on them medically. And Commissioner Wells, I think you did a phenomenal job when you took our own people not to distribute opioids when they're treating them as paramedics as well. Aren't we really looking at the wrong causes, and really let's get down to the basics? Like opioids, they're dangerous, they're addictive, they can have their place if regulated properly. But aren't we better off looking to make marijuana legal in the sense of at least make it a lot more available medically for these people to get the treatment so they don't get stuck in this mix, which we can't seem to get them out of? Just kind of
Some for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know this is an important subject. I know we're going to go over on time, and I have to be somewhere at 1, but I'm willing to take it as long as we need to. But again, I know we're going over, but this is important. And again, this will not be the last meeting. So.
We're going to meet this afternoon?
No, I think we're trying to push it through till, and if you have to step out, then, but,
Right.
Judge,
Okay. The next
again,
speaker.
sorry we can't get everybody.
Don't all lawyers say that. I'll be quick. But hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions as well.
You're not
First
billing
of
by
all-
the hour today, so it really, we're good.
I really would like to, first of all, take the opportunity to thank you all for inviting me to be involved in this process and inviting the drug court and treatment court teams in Pasco County to be involved in this process. I also need to thank you all for your help, your consideration, and your constant support with regard to what we're trying to do in these courts. And Chairman, I think it's wonderful that we're here talking about these sorts of things. This is an important topic. And in Pasco County, the treatment courts, I preside over the drug court, the veterans court, and the family dependency treatment court. So obviously there's a lot of, these issues touch on a lot of things that I see on a daily basis. I guess I'll get my clicker going here. This is a headline that none of us wanted to see, none of us felt good about. Back in 2010, 2011, Pasco and Pinellas County, the 6th Judicial Circuit, led the state in overdose deaths. Now, I think if we put this in perspective, this is in the state of Florida. At that time, the state of Florida was the epicenter of the pill mills. There may be some sort of argument made that we led the country. Certainly not where we want to be. The legislature took great action, along with law enforcement, the county and state legislatures took great actions and really shut down the pill mills, and that really issue kind of got set aside. And once again, and I can't stress this enough, to thank the state, the county, the federal government for all the help they've supported in this effort. we have some relatively famous people recently who, you know, have been using heroin and opioids, and what is old is new again. You know, we heard a lot about opioids and heroin kind of back in the day. They kind of went away, and now here they are again. And these folks all had some sort of opioid-related incident, or fentanyl opioid, synthetic opioid-related incident going. As we can see, and this is a little bit dated now, but we can see that addiction rates from substance abuse, drug poisoning, has outpaced motor vehicle traffic deaths and firearm deaths in our country, according to the CDC, which is obviously why we're sitting here today. It probably puts a little bit different face on what's going on here today. The Mexican drug cartels have really been helping to fuel the fentanyl movement, because fentanyl is a synthetic drug that they can manufacture, and they can maintain and control the entire chain of production, which is important for them and for their profit-making industry. So we can see here that little bit that you see by that penny is sufficient to overdose with fentanyl, and carfentanil is even more potent than that. So we're talking about incredible, you know, danger to, as you said, first responders that show up and deal with these sorts of things. I watched a video of 2 law enforcement officers who were sealing a bag with evidence in it, and you know how sometimes when you seal a bag, a little puffs out. Both law enforcement officers were exposed to fentanyl, and they both described it as they thought they were going to die, and they both were hospitalized as a result of that. So, sorry?
You're getting in, but I don't think the audience is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You are.
Okay.
The-
I need to speak up. This is one of the first times I've ever been accused of not speaking loud enough. Most of the time, they're telling me to tone it down a little bit in court. So as we can see, I mean, we're talking about very, very small amounts and very, very deadly substances involved here. We have, as you can see, we talk about fentanyl. Fentanyl is the big culprit, just because of the sheer intensity of the drug that we heard earlier about, the different type of high it gives, the fact that there are folks out there now that are looking for just fentanyl, which, as you can imagine, the tiniest little variation in that amount is deadly. And I think that leads to a lot of the situations we're having and we're hearing about the Narcan being administered and that sort of thing. Very, very, very strong, and they're mixing it a lot. What we need to remember is most of these folks and most of the people I see are what are called polysubstance abusers, meaning they don't abuse just one drug. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more in just a moment, about what we see that's going to be on the horizon. Polysubstance abusers, so very few people use just just opiates. They use opiates, they use methamphetamine, they use cocaine, they use marijuana, they use Suboxone, they use a lot of different drugs, and I mean, it's not it certainly has happened many times in my court where we drug test somebody and they'll test positive for 5, 6 different types of substances, all in their system at the same time. So, like I said, a lot of it is what you can get your hands on, what's cheap, what's available, and what's that sort of thing. And I think that's important. Kind of anecdotally, the number of people that I see that start with opioids that come from being prescribed by a doctor is actually very low. A lot of people just get into it for recreational purposes, and they're the people that I see in front of that come before me. This is what's happening now. Well, like I said, I talked about this polysubstance abuse. Now we're starting to mix heroin and methamphetamine. And I just wanted to include some of these slides to give you all a foreshadowing. Years ago, I was at a national conference, the National Association for Drug Court Professionals, also known as NADCP, and we go to this conference every year, and it's where kind of the nation's experts on this sort of thing gather. And it's a great source of information. I always learn things when I go there. And years ago, I was there, and they were talking about crack cocaine and this and that. And I'm sitting there thinking, crack cocaine, all we're seeing is opioids. You know, I'm in Pasco County. The pill mills are here. And no one's really talking about it because it hadn't spread really to the rest of the country yet. And then they kind of mentioned it a little bit. Yeah, opioids are on the horizon. Well, we're knee-deep in it here in Pasco County. Well, now what we're starting to see, and I just want to foreshadow a little bit, the increase in methamphetamine. and I'll show you a slide in just a moment that talks about that. So now we have people using methamphetamine because it's so cheap compared to some of the opioids and that sort of thing. And that is because, once again, the Mexican cartels have kind of taken this over, and they can manufacture almost pure methamphetamine. And it is so cheap. And I have a son who's in the FBI, who's on the border, and the information they get is if you buy a ton of cocaine, you're going to take either 1 or 2 tons of methamphetamine with it. So the cartels, the Mexican cartels, are really pushing the methamphetamine hard because there's such a profit margin, because they don't have to rely upon the Colombians or anybody else to bring them the cocaine and that sort of thing. So that is kind of on the horizon, so I think we need to be ready for that. The New York Times has written an editorial this year that meth is everywhere, the forgotten killer, and I'm just going to go through this quickly. This was from a newspaper article that appeared this year. In Pasco County, there was 725 methamphetamine arrests, 131 heroin, and 130 opioid arrests. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of where that kind of stands. This is just a little bit of information from one of the other New York Times articles that just talks about methamphetamine coming back into our communities. In Portland, Oregon, more people died of methamphetamine overdoses than those that died from opioids. And I just bring that because there's a little foreshadowing. I'm going to talk about drug courts now. For every dollar invested nationwide, taxpayers save $3.36 in avoided criminal justice costs. If we add to that the fact of the other associated costs, it can be up to the taxpayer savings as much as $27 for every dollar invested. So the money invested in drug courts and treatment courts, I think, is money well spent. There's a cost savings between $3,000 and $13,000 per client or per defendant in the program, with reduced victimization, with reduced recidivism, and that sort of thing. And they just work. I mean, they work because, and just to give you all a brief model of what we do. When someone comes into my court, when they're referred to, we have worked and partnered with the state attorney's office and the public defender's office and the sheriff's office to identify people who would be a good fit for that program early on, so we can get them out of the jail. They get in front of me. They then are seen every 2 weeks by me at first, and they are drug tested every week. And they have to go to drug treatment every week. They have to go to sober support meetings every week, more than one a week. So we engage them heavily in treatment and encourage that treatment. As they do better, I get to extend them out every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, and then we eventually get folks to graduate. And if given the opportunity, I'd like to, although the time frame today I won't do it, but show you some of those videos, the graduates, because it's quite emotional. Who have returned to our community, who are productive members, who have jobs, whose children are out of the system, who are paying taxes, who are now contributing in many ways to our community, all because of their treatment through our program. And it's actually really nice to see. And I've often said, as a circuit judge, one of the best things I do are adoptions. I love putting families together. Probably second best thing is watching people graduate from drug court and get their lives and their family back. They're held accountable, make no mistake. That's part of what we do. Without accountability of being held accountable to the court, and that's where we differ from some of these drug treatment programs, and where the sheriff's office shows up and also the EMS, and they give them the opportunity for help. Many people won't take it. Well, I have a rather unique position that I can encourage that opportunity where they may not be able to do so. You can just walk out of detox. You're not walking out of Leonard Lakes Jail. So, and that, candidly, is a lot. I've often said in court, 99% of the people cannot do it on their own. So with our help and our kind of cajoling, people are able to do it and get their lives back. And these are good people. I mean, these are very good people who lost their way. And I know I'm painting with a broad brush, but I can tell you, if you sat in and watched some of these folks, you will see these are very good people who merely lost their way. And it's our job as a community, as wanting to improve our community, it's our job to give those people a hand up and a leg up and give them the chance to get back to where they were before. They're regularly drug tested. They have to report to court. We've talked about that, and they are rewarded and also sanctioned for, depending upon how they do. And once again, and I know I sound like a broken record, but without your all's help, without the buy-ins of Mr. McCabe and Mr. Dillinger and Sheriff Nacco and the legislators at this table, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So I thank you on behalf of the whole drug court and family court and family dependency treatment court and veteran court community. So I just wanted to thank you all for that. And now, any questions?
Just that you made one comment that kind of threw me a little bit, was most of the people that you see in court aren't the ones that
Very few
the older
people.
one that get prescribed.
Yeah, very few. We have older folks, but some of them have been recreational drug users for decades. And that's what's interesting, it's interesting, you don't think of, some grandfather sitting there and then he comes in and I say, well, how long you been using? And they go, oh, I've been using 30 years. And you're just like, it's just shocking, it's hard sometimes to wrap your head around that. And we have people that have used for decades, and we finally give them the tools and give them the opportunity. And this is hard work. Remember, this is really hard work. But that's where many of them come from. I have very few people, and we've had discussions about this. And certainly not to say there aren't people there, but it's certainly not anywhere near the majority or even close to it that say I started because I was prescribed it, and now I just kept doing it. That's a fairly low percentage of the people I see, and I'm just speaking anecdotally. I'm not speaking anything else. I would like to offer the opportunity. There was some discussion with regard to bringing folks into the school system. We have a program that we started many years ago called the Drug Court Ambassador Program, where I got tired. I was in juvenile court, and I got tired of the juvenile saying, it's no big deal. I'm just using. It's not that big of a deal. Well, we have people who are former addicts. And you talked about Ryan Leaf, and we spoke about the young man from Gulf High. There's a young man in Dade City named DeAndre Reed, and some of you may remember D. Reed took the Pasco Pirates to the state playoffs a number of years ago, and he received a full football scholarship to play at Maryland. Lost that scholarship because he kept testing positive. Subsequently, got a full. I'm sorry. Marijuana. For marijuana, his nickname became D Weed. Because or D Reefer, because he was smoking so much marijuana, and he got caught. Then he got caught again. Then he got a full scholarship to Bethune-Cookman. Never finished there. Subsequently, gets involved in the trafficking of drugs. And first time he's ever arrested, he goes to federal prison for 7.5 years. And he is one of our speakers, and he is dynamic. He is amazing. He along with, we have folks on there that started out in drug court with me and are now getting their PhDs. And have already got their masters. We have a young man named Steven Sapinski who has over 50 arrests here in Pasco County, and talks about running from the sheriff and all these sorts of things. And now he's gone back to school and college, and now he works as a mental health tech at one of our drug rehab programs. And he can talk to the young people. So those people would love. We have drug counselors, people now in the drug counseling field who were former addicts. They come in and speak. It's really a great group of people, and they would love to come into the schools. They keep asking me to go in, and so I would certainly volunteer those folks because I know their heart is in the right place. They've done it many times before. They know what's appropriate to say in schools and what's not. And we have people from NOPE. We've partnered with NOPE, which is Narcotics Overdose Prevention and Education. One of the moms comes in and talks about losing her son, going to wake her son up one morning. And he was sitting upright in bed with his cell phone on his lap, and she shook him, and he had passed away in the middle of the night. And she comes in and talks about the loss of her son, and she talks about Landon and the effect it had upon her and her family. And so we have, I'm willing to bring this presentation anywhere, anytime, and I know these folks are willing to come as well. So that's kind of. I just want to make sure that's out there and let the school system know we are ready, willing, and able. We've got it all geared up to go, and we've been doing it for probably 5 or 6 years already.
Thank you, Judge Crane. Do we have, I know I called you kind of last minute, but do we have any, the numbers you gave us are great, but I would like to see, what's our goals? What are we hitting?
Our goals is to improve every day, and we can always do that. And I mean that. That's just not lip service. We literally concentrate on that. How do we do better every day? And that's important.
Nationwide average of Pasco County. those are the kind of things.
Okay, I'll need to start pulling those numbers for you and do my best on
I
that.
think it's important, again, because we are doing things, I know we can do more, but I think it's showing it specifically Pasco County, not necessarily the nation, so.
And I'd like to, and what I may try to do is put together and maybe put it up on our website, some more of our graduates, because I think if you all had the opportunity to see some of these people, good people graduating back, because remember, to graduate, you have to have all your fines, costs, and financial obligations taken care of. You've had to done generally some sort of community service. You have to have a job where you actually pay taxes. You know, a lot of people tell me, I'm working under the table. I go, it's not going to work. You got to pay taxes like the rest of us. And so these people are giving back to the community. They have jobs. They're taking care of their financial obligations, and they're meeting all their requirements as far as drug testing and that sort of thing. And those are the requirements to graduate. And so it's good stuff. And I would invite any of you that want to come.
Looks like what you're seeing
I appreciate that, Congressman Bilirakis. Thank you.
different than what the sheriff's office
Mhm.
sees. And the
Right.
EMS. I mean, there's certain cases they will run into because they're big users. and all,
Right.
but Your everyday people that can be using it that you're
Yeah.
explaining to us about.
Absolutely. I've seen people six-figure incomes,
Yeah.
all of a sudden lose everything. I mean, it's just amazing. People in the healthcare field, I mean, some of it's just heartbreaking. And then I do family dependency treatment court where not only is that happening, but we're now having to shelter their kids and bear that cost, that expense, and also the trauma upon the children, I mean, is tremendous. So, I have the opportunity to speak and visit with the children, and I certainly take advantage of that every chance I get. But,
I've heard of and seen some folks that just get hooked on drugs from a doctor, a certain doctor.
Yeah.
that keeps prescribing, and that particular doctor is doing that to a lot of people.
Well, and that's certainly-
They can be stopped, and they're working on stopping those things. That availability for those people that are going to be addicted to it and be able to get it from a doctor all the time. That's
or they can just rotate to another drug, like I said, or multiple drugs. Like I said, it is not uncommon for people to test positive for more than one substance when they test positive. And like sometimes you're like, it's easier for us to say what's not in your system is what is in your system. I mean, it's sad. You wonder how some people are upright, literally. I mean, you literally have, methamphetamine, cocaine, oxys, opiates, marijuana. I mean, you got it all. You're on board. I mean, so.
just from here, you speak after the sheriff's office. But there's a lot of us, we need to work together, and it's a big program, and it's widespread, and we all be a part of the program, so we make things better here in Pasco.
Fabulous point, Commissioner, fabulous point. And I was at the jail recently and talking to folks at the jail, thanking them for the hard work they do, because as Captain Jenkins pointed out, many of these people that are arrested go in there and they start detoxing, and that is a critical part of the process. And but nonetheless, they do a lot of hard work, and many times they don't get to see the result that I get to see. So as they see them, it's on the front end. So I went and have previously gone and thanked their medical staff for their hard work and let them know that they're making a difference on the other end, and how important that is to the folks of Pasco County. But your point is very well taken. Very well taken.
Yes. Well, you have to come forward. I don't know, are you with?
No, I'm actually a resident of Dallas County, but I work with Thermo Fisher Scientific.
Yeah, we normally don't take, if you want to be brief, but we don't. I
Yeah, I
apologize,
just
we
wanted to
don't.
say, Judge, we work with many counties throughout the state and nation, and helping to, in order to help to, my name is Luke Irish. I'm a Dunedin resident, and I'm with Thermo Fisher Scientific, and we do more drug testing in the world. And I just wanted to introduce myself to this, and I love the forum that you're having on the platform, because important to me, obviously it's my job, but more importantly, it's my community. And so I wanted to make myself available as a resource of any of the things that you may or may not need to assist your problem-solving courts, behavioral courts, and things of that nature.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. And once again, thank you for your support. I know I sound like a broken record, but without you all, this doesn't happen.
Yeah, but Judge, you're incredible. And I don't want to say, Is there any way we can, I think that's what the key is, education, bringing these people into the classroom to speak to the kids. The earlier the better, as far as I'm concerned. Is there any way, I mean, I'd like to help, but you've approached the supervisor, obviously.
Right,
the schools.
I've spoke to Kurt Browning about that. We've actually, he's actually been to DCAP, seen it, been very impressed by it. I've had members of the school board, former members of the county commission come to the DCAP program. It is powerful. And the thing is, when I do it, I'm an old guy going, don't use drugs. And they all go, yeah, that's an old guy going, don't use drugs. And then when they get up, like when DeAndre Reed gets up and starts talking about it, and you're like, you know, the kids are like, oh, and he's like, what are you going to tell me about drugs? I've used every one there is. What are you going to tell me? That, you know, what I don't know. And so they are, and Steve Sapinski, he's like, I got 52 arrests. What are you going to tell me about being arrested and using drugs? And, you know, the kids are like, they can't get around that. They can't get around the truth of that, the rawness of that. And it's amazing how many stay after and talk to them. And just, so I appreciate it. And Congressman Bilirakis, you have always been an amazing supporter of us. You have been always there when we've reached out for you and your staff, whether it's Veterans Court or Drug Court or Family Dependence Treatment Court, and I can't thank you enough for that. And I'm certainly willing to work with you in your office and see if we can get into the schools and start helping them with this program, and I would really like to do that. The other thing I want to do is thank everybody. If I can steal this water.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to being back.
Thank you.
We're lucky to have
Thanks
you.
for what you do.
Incredible.
All right, a great segue to our next speaker, who is going to be David Lambert. He's the chairman of the Pasco County Housing Authority. He's going to speak to us about opioid addiction related to mental health and homelessness. And it's a great segue from what we've spoken about so far, because we all know that once these people become addicted, they can become homeless, and it does affect their living situation. So thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Congressman Bilirakis. Thank you for everything you do. I know everybody in this room knows what the Congressman does, but the entire federal delegation has been pretty instrumental because they've seen this happen in communities throughout the country with their colleagues. So the Congressman, Senator Nelson, and Senator Rubio have been actively trying to bring more resources into Florida, which has been very good for us. Now it has hit us on the local level. In Pasco County, I've grown up here all my entire life. We now have big city problems that we didn't have to deal with before, and now it's going to take some significant work and continual work. We've heard from Captain Jenkins, we've heard from Judge Crane, who start with the folks from the beginning, get them through the courts. Then it becomes a big issue of what are we going to do with them. Oftentimes, we've seen people with six-figure salaries have nothing. They also have a criminal record, so they don't have housing, and they don't have a support system. Often in many of those cases, their family has just basically left them at the front door and said, we're not going to do anything to help, which causes a bigger issue where they can relapse back into using. So we have, at the Housing Authority, worked on multiple levels. We have 1,480 Section 8 vouchers and 300+ homes that we work with to help people. The only way that you are not eligible for that through the Department of Housing and Urban Development is if you have been caught manufacturing drugs. So we run a pretty broad-based program where we will bring them in, intake, when they come to the Housing Authority, and when units become available, we work specifically with the public defender, Bob Dillinger, and we work with we created a family self-sufficiency program where when these folks come in, we have a case manager who helps them, an advocate, keeps them out of the system, and helps them work to get a home, because keeping a home over their head is critical for us. It keeps them out of the hospital, out of the jails, and out of everything that can, really cause a problem. The continuum of care, I think you're going to see on the next group. I know a lot about the electric business. I never really knew anything about the housing business till about 8 years ago. But also we started seeing throughout the county problems. Our linemen at WREC would come in and report all along the US 19 corridor. I mean, just needle after needle when they would go out to restore power to someone's home within an area. So much so that we actually started, opening it up for our linemen to be treated for like hepatitis, things like that, to get the vaccinations. Usually, used to it wasn't required. We don't require it now, but we open it. You know, we let them know. The health department has sent out advisories where we've had outbreaks of hepatitis B and hepatitis A, primarily hepatitis B in the West Pasco area where people have been using. So a big deal. It's a big issue for us. So we started wanting to tackle the root cause of the issue. So when you all voted on your on the family housing program over here, where the Old Boys and Girls Club, the Housing Authority put 100 Section 8 vouchers behind that program. That's over $1 million some a year, which will rotate to help get these families, once they get through the court system and they get into recovery, it helps provide them a home, a place for them to go. Also, we have worked to bring Vincent House here to Pasco County. We opened in Hernando County about 1 year and 4 months ago. We're now at 60-some plus members. Many of those folks that are mentally ill also turn to drugs because they have a mental illness. 75% of the people we see that are homeless are mentally ill. That's a big issue. It's a big number across the country. So we have to work to tackle those problems together as a group. And we have come up with some creative ways to do that through the Housing Authority. The first thing was the Homeless Navigation Center. The next thing, we've been working with the Pinellas Pasco Public Defender, Bob Dillinger, to bring Vincent House to Pasco County. Senator Simpson got us $1 million in the state budget for that. Also, he came down and toured Vincent House down in Pinellas County 2 weeks ago. So we're going to really make an impact there, because the goal is to keep those folks, once they go through the courts, or if they have a mental illness and they're not in the court system, that we keep them in recovery and keep them out of the court system. So that's a big issue for us. The continuum of care is transparent all the way through. So the Sheriff's Department has an issue, they arrest them, they get them through detox, they go through Judge Crane's court. Then the next step is getting them a roof over their head, because if you send them back out on the street without a roof over their head, they're going to be back into the system. There's no doubt about that. So that's where we come in. We try to help with the Homeless Navigation Center. We have provided Section 8 vouchers for the program. We are now bringing in Vincent House at the co-op to help, because we build communities. You all seen what we have been able to accomplish together when we work together in Lacucci. We're now doing that with mental health. It was a big issue that came on the horizon for us about 6 years ago. The Housing Authority now is transitioning. Hopefully today we will sign a contract by the end of the week to purchase land in the west side of the county to build 60 units of veterans housing. A big deal for us. We've been working with your group at Community Development to help do that, and it will focus on homeless veterans and their families within our county. So we ask for your support on that. So we get through this whole continuum of care, and it takes everybody, every link in this chain. And I applaud you all for having this today, because I've never seen it before, and we have been dealing with it in a local level throughout our entire service territory. What happens on 19 in this 19 corridor is not going to stay here. It's going to go to Hernando. It's going to the east side of the county. And if we don't aggressively get out in front of it, you're going to see more and more and more of these issues. It's just going to proliferate. So we have an opportunity here today. We don't, this is an opportunity for us to get better. We're at a learning curve here. I think the Commission realizes that, and we're going to do our part at the Housing Authority. We're going to do our part to continue to try to help bring in these services, and it's all about collaborative partnerships. It's all about getting people off the streets, keeping them in recovery, and doing what we need to do to really focus on keeping them there. So. No, we're just the Housing Authority.
What's the success rate
for people who come in the Housing Authority? The only thing that I can tell you is we're 99% occupied. We were 73% about 7 years ago. So we are full, and people are on a waiting list for housing.
And in the houses, is there drug use in the houses? Would you say that that's a
Typically, no.
10% of the houses maybe?
If there's drug use and the sheriff's department comes, and we find that there's an issue, they are taken out of housing, and then they typically go back to where judge, to the court system. But typically, when someone comes out, and we don't just take people who have, all folks are eligible for housing that meet the requirements, that are below the poverty level. So, but we don't typically find that. We don't, what?
No statistics kept as far as the success rate of transitioning an addict?
Into housing? We don't keep those statistics. We don't keep numbers. The only thing we do is take referrals when they come through Baycare or someplace like that. We don't get involved in anybody's.
Is there a reason why you don't get? I'm just curious. Like those numbers might be valuable for determining if the program's effective or if there needs to be changes. Those just in the resource, is there a capacity or an ability to maybe track some of this stuff?
Well, I'm sure with Judge Crane and the Sheriff's Department, there is a capacity to do that, but we don't. There's certain questions that we are allowed to ask and that we are not allowed to ask under federal fair housing laws. We do a background check. We make sure that you are not manufacturing drugs. We keep the communities that we have safe, and then we take in referrals from folks like Baycare and other places to keep them housed. We do not go and track them. We do have advocates within the system that help, but we don't necessarily per se know what they have. It's not, we can't ask them any medical questions. It's just totally against the rules.
David, I don't know if you followed the West Pasco board. So what they did is down in Leisure Lane, which is probably the top of the bubble, which are the highest drug use calls that are on there. Habitat bought 41 lots. The county commission was magnificent in allocating $500,000 to help them close on those properties, which they've done. Cobus Appleburn, the executive director, get properties where he can probably find another 15 to 20. That's almost like half the they've got enough money to build one home because the Gulf Harbor is raising some money. Fundraisers coming up to go raise more. It's going to take a long time to get that together. I did tell one of you before, as a realtor, we'd love to work with you to try to take over some units. If you're in the process of going to buy some units, buy some land, I think if we actually focus to that area, you could probably take a major piece and put some major housing in there, because Habitat is going to take them a few years to raise the money to go build it. And with your Section 8 housing vouchers as well, you can probably double the length of them, because to build one of these homes is probably $500 a month, maybe $400 a month, instead of spending $800 or $1,000 for the vouchers. It could give these people a good leg up to get going. And I think there's an opportunity there that we'd love to try to work with you, especially if there's some funding, or even statewide if there's funding, to try to make this a real big project. But I'd love to get us all together on all levels to try to really look at that project and find out what can be done, because not only will it help what you're trying to do, but it can also take some big stress off the sheriff's office as well.
Well, we will certainly work with, and two of our board members at the Housing Authority are on, one's on the West Pasco Habitat for Humanity, and the other's East Pasco. We have donated significant dollars to both Habitat for Humanities because you are really one of our only low-income housing providers, and our job at the Housing Authority is to get people housed. That's our big deal. But as it specifically pertains to the Veterans Project, okay, we are going to use VASH, which is a federal program. So VASH has a different set of requirements. We are allowed to be a lot more lenient with that. So as we move through this process and we purchase the property that's already developed, then we're going to build unit after unit there as we get the money to do so. And then we have applied to the federal government to what they call project base, to a specific site, those VASH vouchers, and it gives us a lot more leeway because some of those folks can have a different set of issues with the court system. So that's the reason that we're tackling this project first, is because there's a lot of viability within the federal level to help veterans. So, but we will happily work with you on any type of housing community that's what we do, so, yes.
Thank you, David. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is going to come to us from Baycare Behavioral Health. This is actually a partner of ours here in the county that when we have someone come through our offices that needs to go somewhere immediately, we work very closely with Baycare, so I'm very happy that they're here at the table today. And Joy Toscani, who is the Clinical Services Manager, she's going to speak to us about opioid use disorder and treatment options that they have at Baycare. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay, and is Pasco? Oh, okay. All right, so opioid use disorder and treatment options. So the disease model, so if we look at addiction, in terms of a disease model, it's a chronic brain disease. It's progressive, not curable, meaning people are in recovery, and that's a process that happens, throughout their lives. They experience relapses and remissions. So we've all heard about relapse. It's a part of the process very often for most people. A little bit closer, okay, sorry. And it's treatable. We all know that it's treatable as well. There are many evidence-based modalities, many evidence-based practices that we can utilize to treat folks if we can get them in the right place. And it may be fatal if left untreated, so that's always an important thing to remember. Opioid use disorder, and this is the definition I found from SAMHSA. They reduce perception of pain, but can also produce drowsiness, mental confusion, euphoria, nausea, constipation, and depending upon the amount of the drug taken, can depress respiration. And this is the part, of course, that makes them so deadly and so fatal. Your respiration, your ability to breathe. So that's what's so frightening. And people don't realize that they're seeking that euphoria. That's the constant thing that they're seeking, initially anyway, but unfortunately can lead to very frightening consequences. So in the U.S., 115 plus people die each day. I just went to the FATA conference just a couple of weeks ago, Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, and these are some of the statistics that I walked away with, and I was absolutely floored. 115 people die a day, opioid-related death, 14 deaths a day in Florida. The opioid crisis costs $502 billion to the system. When we think about all the different costs, legal costs, housing, dependency, loss of work, emergency departments, all the medical stuff that goes with it, it's just astronomical. 80% of those addicted to heroin were originally prescribed opiates, so I know I've heard some different information today. And the U.S. is consuming 90% of the world's opiates. I was astounded by that. So it's definitely our county, it's our state, but our country. I mean, I was absolutely floored by that statistic. Okay, so ASAM, this is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into too much terminology, but this is how we determine, this is the manual that we use to determine someone's level of care. It's the American Society of Addiction Medicine. And this was their definition of addiction. It's a primary chronic disease of brain reward, motivation, memory, and related circuitry. Dysfunction in these circuits leads to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. So the person is constantly pathologically pursuing reward and relief. So if that makes sense, the reward is that euphoric high, right? And then relief when they don't have that. So when you're going through withdrawal. Initially, it's the reward cycle they get caught up in. They want to feel that euphoria. Eventually, it becomes just wanting to have an escape from being dope sick would be what it's referred to, and going through that withdrawal process. So, and you get caught up in this cycle over and over and over again. So the DSM-5, this is our diagnostic criteria that we use to determine if someone has a diagnosis of opiate use disorder. So the opiates are taken in larger amounts or for a longer period than intended. So they're using way more than they thought they would. Great deal of time spent in activities to obtain, so they're always trying to get it, and then recover from it. So those two things. Craving, strong desire to use, always wanting to use, feeling that in their body. Those cravings can be incredibly intense and incredibly powerful, and they can be triggered by anything. They can be triggered by a sound, a smell, something they hear, something they see, something they feel, I recently heard a story about someone coming off the basketball court. They'd been playing basketball, and so they were sweaty, and they were getting ready to do something that made them feel anxious. They were about to talk to somebody that made them feel anxious. It was the combination of being sweaty, hot, and anxious, and they said, and so someone in recovery, they said, oh my gosh, and they'd been in recovery for years, oh my gosh, I feel like I have to go use. But that combination, so it can be multiple things, and people don't always know what it is that sends them into those cravings. So they've often had unsuccessful efforts to cut down, so they've tried many times to stop using on their own and haven't been able to do that. Many activities are given up because of use, despite negative effects, so bad things keep happening, and yet they keep using. Failure to fulfill major role obligations, work, school, taking care of their children, those kinds of things, paying bills, and continued use despite social or interpersonal problems, relationship issues. Recurrent use in hazard situations, this could be driving, this could be work, this could be while they're taking care of their children, this could be many things. And continued use despite having persistent medical issues that are exacerbated. Tolerance, so they have a higher tolerance, they need more and more and more of the substance, or to mix the substance with other things to experience the same result. And withdrawal from opiates, so very often, again, taking opiates just to avoid going into a withdrawal state. So, emotional pain. So, opiates are actually better in helping people manage emotional pain, unfortunately, than physical pain. So better, I use that in quotes, what that means is that people are using more because it's masking and minimizing how they feel. So it actually leads to increased physical pain because your body stops managing its own pain in a healthy way. So people are using over and over again to not deal with the emotional pain. So very often, at the root of all of this is some type of trauma. And if we're not addressing and dealing with this trauma that leads to this addiction, then they're going to just remain in this cycle. If they don't have the tools and the skills that they need to manage the trauma that's going to present itself as soon as someone gets sober and gets into recovery, then they're going to go right back to using. So that's why treatment is so important. So you'll see those exaggerated responses. These are just the way some people have described their feelings when they were under the influence of substances. All my problems disappeared, felt like I was under a warm blanket, thought this was how normal people feel. I thought that was really powerful, and just if you're dealing with a lot of trauma throughout your life, and sometimes very often kind of growing up, it's been there forever, they don't know what it feels like to feel normal. So they're thinking they found it with this substance. They're just kind of continuing to use. So, best dream I ever had, but I was awake. So these feelings are very powerful and very intense. So I just saw a presenter recently who described heroin use, and he said, if you think about a fantastic meal you had recently, it was like so good, you just sat back and you're like, wow, that was fabulous, I enjoyed that, it was like amazing. What a great meal. So that hits about 500 pleasure domain release is what happens with that. Heroin is about 500 million. So it's dramatic how it impacts someone's body and their pleasure release. So it's really hard to combat when you're trying to get people to focus on everyday things and they've had that experience. It's very hard for them to walk away from that. The neurobiology of addiction. So it's an activity which initially stimulates the limbic system, which results in changes of neurotransmitter levels, which are perceived as euphoria. So that's that euphoria we're talking about. The limbic system is the most primal part of the brain that's responsible for go-get impulses. This is the part of our brain that's like, yeah, go get whatever you want, do what you want. Don't think about consequences. And this is fully developed when we're 21 days old. Our limbic system is all ready to go at 21 days old. Its counterpart, the frontal cortex, is responsible for the impulse control decision-making, the stop part of our brain. So the limbic is our go part, and our frontal cortex is the stop part. That's fully developed at 25 years old. So you can see we have a big gap there, which leads to a lot of problems in terms of our decision-making. So the part that gets hijacked in addiction is the limbic system, the go-get system. And so we don't get to the part of the stop and think, the frontal cortex part doesn't get to get engaged because of the go-get part of the limbic system. Okay, so circuitry must be rewired for recovery to occur. We have to get people out of that active addiction, get them to a place where they're clean, get them where they build those skills to manage and deal and cope with that trauma, and rewire that circuitry. And this can take a long, extended period of time. And that's why recovery, support is so important, because relapse is definitely very often a likely part of that process. So. So we use screening and assessment tools to identify an appropriate level of care. So when someone comes in to us, very often by the time they get into a treatment environment to have an assessment, there's likely a problem. They've gotten involved in a system, typically, and that's what brings them to us. So we're looking at severity, duration, frequency of use to determine the appropriate level of care. Additionally, the impact of their use on their daily life and the consequence they experience. The higher the severity, the higher the appropriate level of care. However, if someone's not internally motivated, doesn't have any motivation, it doesn't really matter what level of care we put them in, they're not likely to be successful. So sometimes that motivation has to start externally. It might be a court system, and we'll take that. If we start externally, sometimes it's dependency, it's through child welfare. But if we can start there and we can move them towards an internal motivation to change, and we do that through a process called motivational interviewing and get them to understand how their lives can be better if they stop. But we have to get them to us first and to be able to have those conversations. So we use part of our ASAM criteria. We're looking for, to determine this level of care, we're looking for acute intoxication. Obviously, do they need to go to detox? Are they having such a problem that they're not medically stable? So we need to make those kind of determinations. Biomedical conditions that could complicate their recovery, emotional, behavioral conditions, readiness to change. Are they ready to do this? If we try to put them in residential and they're not ready to change, they're probably not going to be successful and they're probably going to leave. So we really need to get them to a place where they're ready. We have to look at relapse, continued use, and continued problem potential, and their recovery living environment. If they're in an outpatient setting, which means they're just coming into us, and their recovery living environments, they're surrounded by people who are in active use, they're going to have significant problems being able to maintain recovery. So, and the likelihood is very low that they will.
Real quick, I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just trying to be candid here. Let me ask a couple questions. I appreciate your time. I want to hear about Pasco County. What are you guys doing in Pasco County? Mr. Angel asked a good question where, working with David Lambert, or when we put folks in housing, Baycare puts folks in housing, what's the follow through? What's the success rates? What's the goals? What can we do more together? I don't see anything in here about Pasco County. That's really, I think, again, it's not bad information. I think it's good information for us to bring home and maybe read later. But ideally, we're here, and Baycare is a great partner. We support Baycare. We couldn't do it without you. But this is an opportunity for us all to sit down and say, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's opportunity. So hopefully you have some information on maybe specifically what you all are doing at Pasco County. Because, again, I know the things you're doing from when Doug was there. And you have been good partners. But I think the public needs to hear more specifically. And Garen, again, had a good question with what do we do with those folks that have addiction? How are you following through? Or because I know you just don't put them in housing and never follow up them again. So I don't know how the rest of you feel. I just don't want to waste time and not.
Sure. No, I hear you.
I'll follow up before you go.
Mr. Moore.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. So, outcomes. Let's talk about outcomes. Pasco County outcomes. Obviously, public funds go towards you. Public dollars are passed through the United Way, other areas, DOH. I don't know, Mike, and then DOH, do you guys give any money, passing any money to Medicare? Yeah, okay. So, we need to see outcomes. We want to know what the outcomes are.
Okay.
Because moving forward, for us to get to a resolution, we know our current outcomes, where they stand. Success rates, number of people you treat on a yearly basis, maybe even a monthly basis, a breakdown of that. So we have an idea of what's actually going on in our county.
Sure.
It's very, very important. And again, not saying this isn't great information, and we appreciate information. It's an education for some. But again, we need to know what our solutions are going to be, and to do that, we're going to know where we are now.
Right, I hear you.
If we don't know where we are now, we're not going to know how to get there, right?
Right, absolutely. So, and I don't have specific numbers for what we're, how many people we're treating. I can't speak to that right now, and that's certainly something we could have at a later time. I was just kind of bringing some treatment information, like how we make treatment decisions and what our options are for treatment. So
that's very important, again, because again, us as a county commission, we do pass public funds to Baycare.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Our partners. And going forward, I think one of the things we're going to be talking about more and more, probably as a commission, maybe even where do our dollars go? are we getting, are the citizens of Pasco County getting a return on their investment for the dollars that are being used to treat this epidemic?
Right,
If it's
absolutely.
not, those dollars will no longer go to those areas. We will sway those to somewhere else. So,
Right.
you know, that's got to be a big part of our conversation going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Baycare, obviously does, get a lot of funding, and then we do treat a very large indigent population. So a lot of the folks that are coming into our doors, kind of what we're talking about, maybe through the court system, through child welfare, have no insurance. So very often we're treating them, through those kind of state dollars. So they're coming in and often receiving outpatient, group therapy, sometimes going to our residential programs where they can be there for extended period of times. They're coming to detox, which is our acute, treatment process. They're at the, 3 to 5 days for detox. So all of that stuff, there are state dollars and funds that support and pay for, all of those treatment options.
We need to be able to track those.
Right.
How many residential beds, does Baker have right now in Pasco County?
I believe it's 33.
And they're all on the west side, or?
Yes, yes. So our residential is at our Community Recovery Center, which is right next to North Bay Hospital. So yeah, we have, all of our beds are right there, yeah. And some of those are state funded, and some of those are, through insurance as well.
If you don't mind, I might be able to help with this a little bit. We work and we partner with Baycare with Veterans Court, Drug Court, and Family Dependency Treatment Court. They're a wonderful partner. Some of those beds are veterans beds, Congressman Bilirakis, specifically designated for veterans, and we use the Community Recovery Center for the veterans through there, that they're a regular part of our program. They're there for our staffings. The Baycare also has the FIT program, which helps in dependency court, which helps people, goes into their houses, helps them get their children out of the system and bring them back. I do family dependency treatment court, so I work with the FIT program sometimes. Baycare has some veterans dollars that they were able to receive. They help us in Veterans Court, aside from even CRC. So Baycare, that's kind of where they intersect in Pasco County, and they intersect in a very real way. We are kind of the rubber meets the road, and we're much appreciative for that.
And Judge, that's why I brought it up. I know these things, but again, there's some numbers I don't know, and I'm not taking it away. We're here to talk about the great things going on and the way we can all do better in Pasco County to help others, and that's kind of where I'm trying to get at. You have to have 33 beds ideally. How many beds do you need, and what can we do together to get there?
Well, we would need,
that's my point.
333, but yeah,
but
yeah.
My point.
But how many of those people are coming back too, right? So that's very important. It's very important how many of those people are coming back.
So our residential program, if that's the only one in Pasco County, how many people can you serve, right? So obviously there's a much higher need than we have in terms of availability. So some people do come back, but we have recently changed our residential program to be a longer residential, so they're not there as short of a period of time. So the longer they're in treatment, the better the outcome is going to be. So we have, I think it's 6 to 9 months now, as opposed to 3.
What's the cost per patient?
Yeah, we have very good.
The cost per patient, yeah, that I wouldn't know, yeah. So that depends. I mean, that would be, sometimes it's going to be, if they have insurance, and then that would be paying. Other times it is state funded, that we do have, folks who are state funded who are receiving, those services.
I look at a very realistic statistic. We saw earlier in the presentation today that in 2010, Pasco County was worst in the state in opioids, and now we're in 2018, and we're worst in the state in opioids still. And if I look at the chart from the sheriff's office, we're tracking essentially 100% over 2017's numbers, but yet our addiction program doesn't track any statistics. And so for me, I look at this, and this is 15 pages of accountability for a patient. I think the more important metric to watch is the accountability for Baycare to the patients.
Sure.
Because if we're not tracking that, how do you know if you're successful other than, and I know Baycare is a business, right? So it is taking in money and paying these patients. And a lot of times it's kind of like the private prison system where, look, there's a dollar sign on a patient, and whether we like that or not, that's the facts. And so if I don't see any numbers to substantiate success, I think we're doing the same thing year over year over year over year, and that's why we're just getting worse. Like there's.
Well, absolutely, and there are things that need to change, and we look at these statistics, and it's frightening, and I completely agree with you. And we do have numbers. I don't have them with me today, but we absolutely do have numbers. I was, kind of asked to talk about treatment options and how we get to those conclusions. So I do apologize, and we can have that another time, but I do want to speak to the fact that, like, I was just recently at that FATA conference, and they were talking about people there all over the state of Florida, and we do need to do things differently. Some of the things that we need to do differently is we need to intervene as early as possible. There are pilot programs throughout the state who are intervening at the emergency room, who are meeting the folks who are coming in who have just been, shot with an Narcan, and they're intervening with those folks right then. And we currently have a position for a peer specialist that I'm trying to fill, and we'll get that person in there who will go. So this is a peer. This is someone who's also in recovery that's going to go meet with those folks right then, right when they're coming in, and engage them, and get them to hopefully commit to coming into a treatment program and to at least give that a try. So those are the pilot programs throughout the state that are happening, and the things that would help us as a county really affect change and do things a little bit differently. So there are those things that are happening out there, and I think it would be really great if Pasco was also doing those things.
Keep in mind, we're all here, we're all equal, we're here for the same thing. So I'm not being critical, we're just, again, this is the first meeting, and we appreciate everybody and what they do. So I'm not, because Baycare does a great job.
Yeah.
But again, it comes down to, again, we're not picking on, it's not about, we're all one. We all want the same thing, we all want to help others, that's why we're here. So
Right, absolutely.
please don't take it that way.
No.
But I think the numbers are important, I think your return on investment's important. I think
Absolutely.
the folks in the county need to hear the great things that we already have going on, Commissioner. And then I'll go to
Do
you,
you
David.
keep a waiting list?
A waiting list for residential? Yeah. So there would be folks that would be on the waiting list.
How long is your waiting list?
I don't manage the residential program, so I don't have those numbers at my fingertips. I do the outpatient side of it.
It depends. We use them every day. So it depends. How many people are leaving, how many people are leaving successfully, how many people are
constantly
leaving.
changing.
Yeah, it can really fluctuate depending upon the population within, for instance, CRC. I mean, that's a question we deal with every day.
So if someone wants and is ready to go into treatment and your facility is full, what do we do?
That is a great question.
Well, and I'd like to answer that question too. But first, Commissioner, I know this gentleman here is asking a lot of questions on statistics. We weren't asked to do that. We were asked to come and give you an overview of what we do, and I think we would have been better prepared had we had been asked to give you statistics. We were just asked to give you what you do. But to answer that question, Commissioner.
Again, these are we're sitting there from
Yeah.
the last meeting, and they're still good questions. We've all had good questions.
Yeah,
It's not a bad
we
question.
certainly want to give you everything
Yep.
certainly want to give you everything that you're asking for sure, because we live in this community and we've got a vested interest.
Absolutely.
We have over a year's waiting list at the Housing Authority to provide housing. Some of those can be 3 to 4 years. There is not enough beds available. There are not enough houses available, especially in Pasco County, for affordable housing. Some of our seniors can be on a waiting list for over 3 years to have affordable housing. Some of our veterans, that's why we're building a veterans housing complex for those, can be on a waiting list for 4 to 5 years. Not only does the federal government provide us vouchers, but sometimes a voucher is for a landlord tenant. So we don't have available affordable housing for that voucher to give those folks to find a home in Pasco County. So it's a big issue all the way around the spectrum, and those of us who deal with it in that classification every single day, we can have people on that list for 2-3 years in certain instances. There's a huge need and not enough supply, and there's not a lot of enough money to be made off of low to no income people in housing. So
Well, I think I told you that we brought it up, or I brought it up at a recent commission meeting about accessory dwelling units, allowing us to put a lot more of those in the county, and then to go into a smaller, reducing our minimum house, and maybe putting multiple minimum houses, Katrina cottages, or whatever you want to call them, in certain areas. So I think we're going to start looking at creative ways to get more affordable housing.
yeah, and I think we have a lot of great opportunities here, and it's really inspiring to see you all coming to the table with this. So.
It's really important stuff.
Yeah, well, I just want to say that, Baycare does an outstanding job, and I know you can back it up with the numbers at the next meeting.
Sure.
This has been outstanding. I have to leave, but I wanted to share some good news. The federal government has appropriated $4 billion, additional dollars, towards substance abuse programs, and it will be allocated soon. And one of the recipients will be Premier Community Health Centers in Pasco County. So they will be performing those services as well. Now, I want to make sure that they have the Narcan. If it's a discounted rate, a small amount, people have to pay based on their income, that's fine too, but it's got to be readily available. So I just want to say again, this is an issue that I truly care about. These people at this table are outstanding. The reason y'all are successful, and look, I know the statistics and everything, but it would be a hell of a lot worse if we didn't have you as participants and contributors. So I appreciate y'all. I'm willing to get involved. If you want me at the next meeting, if I don't have votes in DC, I'd be happy to be here. So thanks for doing this, and it is an epidemic. And we have to deal with it. We have to deal with the mental health and the substance. Sometimes it's together. But people have issues with the abuse, but also mental health, and we have to tackle it. So thanks for including me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just one last thing I wanted to say real quick is about medication-assisted treatment. I want to make sure that you're familiar with that. We started a program, it's been almost a year that it's been operational, where we're providing Vivitrol, and there are other options for medication-assisted treatment, Suboxone, and methadone, of course, has been around for years. But there's lots of federal funding, there's lots of focus on that right now as a new way to treat this epidemic, and that's kind of one of the things in terms of providing that in the emergency rooms, is starting that kind of treatment right from the get-go when people are coming in after being revived from Narcan, and starting those kind of programs right away. So there's a lot of focus on that statewide as a way to intervene with this epidemic. So.
And thank you again. Thank you for everything Baker does, because we do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is going to be Monica Russo, who is the coordinator for Pasco County Alliance for Substance Abuse, also known as ASAP. She's going to be talking to us about tackling the opioid crisis in Pasco County. So thank you for joining us, Monica.
Good morning.
Hello.
It's a nice I voted sticker.
Hey, thank you so much. I've been waiting, a few weeks to wear it because I voted by mail. So it's very exciting.
So just while we're waiting for her presentation to come up, I just want to say thank you to our presenters that have come up so far. And this is the very first workshop, so they weren't 100% sure what was expected of them. So when I asked them to present, I did ask them to give you an overview of what they did. I told them the questions that came up, we would not know exactly what questions you had as commissioners. So we will take those questions back, and I will absolutely give all of you the answers to those questions.
That'd be great. I would appreciate it.
All right. So tackling the opioid crisis in Pasco County, I just have a really brief overview. I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't explain a little bit about ASAP to this group, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to describe some indicators and influences of the opioid crisis here in Pasco, and then just talk about some of the strategies that we're implementing at a community level. So to start, ASAP is an addiction prevention coalition. So just for your reference, there is a coalition like ASAP in every single county within the state of Florida. All 67 counties have an addiction prevention coalition. And basically what that means is we are a diverse group of stakeholders around the community that come together to create those community action plans to reduce the biggest drug issues in the community. So as you can guess, opioids is obviously one of them here in Pasco. And we also work upstream. So from parents to teachers to law enforcement to judges, you name it, we have people who are engaging in our coalition to come up with the best solutions to our problems here. And we do that by mainly working upstream. And when I say that, I encourage you all to imagine this picture. I'm so sorry, most of you have heard this already. I'll give you a brief view or version of this story. But basically, in this picture, you know, there's this beautiful stream. Imagine that we're all eating lunch at the bottom of the stream, right? And we just keep seeing kids floating down this river. There's so many kids floating down this river that we have an assembly line pretty much made up. We have one person in the water getting the kids out, throwing them to the bank, one person doing CPR, one person calling 911, one person posting on social media to get everyone down here because there are kids drowning in the river and we need all hands on deck. ASAP is running upstream to figure out why those kids are falling in the river. So that's what we do as a coalition. So we do our best to make sure those kids aren't drowning, right? So that might be giving them life preservers. That might be teaching them how to swim. It might be fixing the bridge that they're falling off of and into the water to begin with. So those are always going to be our priorities. We're looking at the environmental infrastructure and why we might be seeing high risks of certain issues. That's the wrong way. There we go. So this is just some of our community partners. This is not a comprehensive list. This was about 2 years ago. So obviously we have a lot of community partners that engage in all of these plans, including many of you. So thank you. So, I mean, as if we need to go over some of the data again, you know, we know that we have a big issue here in Pasco County. Basically, this just shows you the rank of several counties in Tampa Bay against one another. So out of all 67 counties in the state of Florida, Manatee County ranked #1 for overdose deaths in 2018, for the 2018 rank. The data itself is 2 years worth just prior to 2018.
Is that an overdose from anything?
It is, but the majority of them are opioids at this point. So as you can see, Pasco County is ranked 5th. Pinellas is 7th, Hillsborough is 15th. So this is just your Tampa Bay area. If you look at the 2017 ranks, you'll see that Pasco County was ranked 4th, and now we're ranked 5th.
And is that per capita or total?
So it's a rate per 100,000. So actually, that is a really great segue into my next slide. So this is the rate per 100,000 for both of those years. So Pasco County in the 2018 rate was 25. So if we had 100,000 people only living in this county, 25 would have died. That would be the rate. Again, this is data from 2016 and 2017 collated to provide you this rate. And then similarly, 2017 rate was 22. So what I'd like to point out about this is that our numbers are getting worse according to these metrics, but our rank is going down. So it makes it look, if you're looking at this, if you're looking at our rank, we're 5th, and last year we were 4th. It makes it look like we're doing better, but other people are just doing a lot worse. So that's really disheartening. You know, I mean, we're so thankful that we're not doing as worse as we could be. But I mean, it's all over Florida. It's all over the United States. I know you all know that. This is just a few other indicators. I just want to make sure that everyone doesn't forget how substance abuse addiction is in all of these different leading causes of death. So this is a chart of the 10 leading causes of death in Pasco County provided by Florida Charts. You will not see overdose on here, right? It's not on there, but it is embedded in multiple of these. So unintentional injury is the 4th leading cause of death in Pasco County. About a third to almost a 5th are caused by poisonings, and depending on the age group, it's the #1 cause of death is poisonings and unintentional injury. Similarly, you can go down to suicide. A lot of those are drug-related. And at the very bottom, #10, you have chronic liver disease and cirrhosis, which are overwhelmingly only caused by untreated hepatitis and alcoholism. All right, so the scope of the problem. Obviously, we know that there's high mortality. I really want to emphasize that this issue isn't just limited to that. This is, a lot of people are obviously dying, but we have a lot of illness spreading from this as well. We're seeing hepatitis B rates increase. We're seeing hepatitis C. Our hepatitis C rates are 3 times the state average. Our hepatitis B are 5. So this is largely believed to be from needle sharing. We also have very high rates of neonatal abstinence syndrome, and according to the latest data that I have from Healthy Start Coalition in Pasco, we saw a 200% increase in babies being born going through withdrawal. Obviously, this disrupts families and community connectedness, and there is a high emotional and economic cost. So I get this question a lot, how much does the opioid crisis cost, Florida or whatnot? I can say that the Council of Economic, basically the White House, they commissioned a report to see how much it cost the whole country, and they came up with the most modest number of being $294 billion. So, you can divide by 50 states and you can divide by 67 counties, and we're still millions and millions of dollars in total costs. So about the crisis, I really need to emphasize that addiction is an evolving disease of despair. We can talk about it as an opioid crisis. We are doing ourselves a disservice if we do that. Throughout the last 10 years, we continue, probably longer than that, but for the last many, many years, we continuously view different addiction issues, and we kind of play whack-a-mole, right? Oh, it's the crack epidemic. Oh, it's heroin. Oh, it's the pill epidemic. And we do our best to solve that one individual problem, but addiction evolves. It metastasizes. It would be like saying to someone who has cancer mainly of the liver, but it's already metastasized, that we're only going to focus on treatment of your liver, right? You have to look at the whole community. You have to look at the whole person in a cancer treatment. You have to look at the whole community. And basically, if people are very addicted to one drug and they don't have access to that drug anymore, they'll find a way to get another drug. That's why we have so many different types of comorbidities in addiction.
So Monica, would you say that it's also related to the price, I guess the street price of the drug too? So it's kind of like the trend. So opioids are the thing now. What's the cheapest one on the street? So that's why you're seeing it move from heroin to, pill form oxy, and back and forth, whatever's cheapest on the street now.
Yeah, I definitely see that addiction evolving based on drug availability.
So right now, the Mexican meth is really what is most prevalent. The reason that we're talking about opioids is because we're not seeing the overdoses and the overdose deaths related to meth in the same capacity that we are with the opioids.
Mm-hmm.
That's because the cost is lower for this Mexican meth versus if somebody's cooking it in their garage.
Well, and that's an excellent question. So part of ASAP, we have a lot of different task forces, and one of the task forces within ASAP is our recovery committee, which you've been able to meet at a few of our different meetings and proclamations. And they tell us a lot of different reasons about why they specifically switched to meth. So some of them are trying to wean themselves off of opioids themselves alone, and they used meth, and then had a completely different experience and were immediately addicted to meth. So there's many different reasons. So I wouldn't want to say it's only because of availability or cost, but it definitely evolves based on those and then many other reasons as well. And then I also want to really emphasize kind of what Joy already mentioned, that addiction is strongly influenced by emotional pain. So we can talk about physical pain, and we really have done that as a nation. We've talked about how physical pain and the prescription of opioids is a great precursor to being addicted. But it's that emotional pain that we're really not talking about, and that is a huge, huge driver. It's often very influenced by social determinants of health. That risk map that you all saw, or that heat map that Captain Jenkins showed, we've gathered data at zip code levels to be able to see what else is going on in those communities. So not only are the communities that have the highest arrest for opioids in the Holiday, the west part of the county, those zip codes are also having the highest rate of removal of children from their families by DCF. We're seeing the lowest socioeconomic range in those groups. We're seeing the worst graduation rates in those groups. It is a multifaceted issue going on there. It's not just arrests. It's the death rates are higher. Everything is higher in those areas. And naturally, if you are getting removed from your family and you're being displaced and your family keeps relapsing, what are your good outcomes going to be for your personal self as a young person? And that's often why addiction is cyclical and intergenerational. And yes, it is caused in part by prescribing practices. But something we haven't mentioned yet today is Hospital 21. Maybe Representative Mariano will go into that a little bit more, but we will not be seeing as many doctors overly prescribing opioids moving forward.
If I could jump in for just
Of course.
very briefly. we look legislatively to try to address some of these issues. It's interesting. We responded to an overdose death recently, and there was an individual who overdosed on heroin and fentanyl. And he actually screamed at the sheriff's office and said, "This is your fault." And of course, we inquired as to what his thought process was, and he explained, when you guys made it illegal, and you began to monitor the pill mills, and you started the PDMP, the prescription drug monitoring program, that did not allow us to have doses that were measurable. Now my friend, who before could honor his habit in a way that was more healthy for him, has to turn to heroin and fentanyl, which is not regulated, and it is causing additional problems. So the reason that I bring that up is just simply to say that sometimes we try to solve one problem, and then there are the unintended consequences. We can solve one problem, and then we can potentially create another problem. And so that's just something to consider as we talk about, obviously, government's involvement, and legislative. Certainly, I think there's a place for that. We just need to be very thoughtful and learn from the failures of the past, or the lessons of the past, that the law of unintended consequences.
And then last thing I have on here is that it's often a child onset disease. So this is just going into solutions. What are we doing at a community level? I did just want to put this up here. This is called the socioecological model. It's my favorite thing in my field. So it just shows you that there are strategies you can deploy at the individual, interpersonal, organizational, community, and policy level. And that the higher up you go, the more impact you'll have, basically. So what are we doing in Pasco County? We're doing a lot of things. So again, ASAP is all about its partners. We are nothing without our partners. You saw that list of partners earlier in the presentation. So when we're talking about ASAP, we're really talking about the combined work of the sheriff's office, judges, teachers, everybody all together. And this is what we're doing. From a primary prevention, so from education and prevention perspective, we are doing safe medication disposal initiatives. We are showing people where they can dispose of their medications. We're encouraging them not to keep them in their houses, because we have a lot of senior citizens doing that. They're terrified to throw their medication away. They're terrified to flush it down the toilet. So they just keep it in their house, which puts them at a very increased risk of people coming and taking it from them, but also younger people dabbling in their drugs as well. We help coordinate education in schools. So right now, we have 16 different schools that are receiving evidence-based curriculum for drug prevention and overall health and wellness. And that is being provided by Baycare Behavioral Health and Youth and Family Alternatives. We do a lot of medication safety trainings, we do youth-led campaigns, and we do our best to create a culture of health in general. And I am happy to answer questions on all of these, but I'm going to go through this in the interest of time. From the secondary prevention perspective, we work really hard to increase access to naloxone. And I did want to mention that Baycare recently received some free Narcan kits, and I believe, and either Tracy or Joy can correct me on this, that they are giving those to patients' families. So if there's a patient going in for an opioid issue, the family member might want to have that Narcan on them in case their loved one would overdose. They have that available for them. We work really hard on reducing stigma of this, to be honest. And I know you guys know that. We come up to you for proclamations all the time about decreasing the stigma, and that's because it is a huge issue in people wanting and seeking help to begin with. And that's not just resonated in national statistics, but also in our own local focus groups. We try really hard to increase access to care, education on what's going on to our ER doctors so that they can be best prepared, increasing knowledge of medication-assisted treatment, which Joy's presentation is great for that, and then the Good Samaritan law. So basically, the number one reason people die from the opioid crisis is often time. It's time. It's time because we have naloxone. We have the ability to revive a person, but they don't get it in time. And a lot of the time, the reason that is because people are too scared to call 911. A lot of people who overdose are overdosing with someone. We need to increase the call to 911. We need to increase access to naloxone. So one of the things we really try to push is the Good Samaritan Act. If you are acting in good faith to save a life, you will not be prosecuted for the charges of having drugs on you. That's not always the case if you're trafficking or if you're selling, obviously, but for the most part, you won't be prosecuted for that. Tertiary-wise, we are increasing access to recovery groups. We work with youth recovery services and really trying to get those services for young people, creating an environment in which people in recovery can thrive. And this is really where my dissertation research will be focused as I start working on that in the next few months. But basically, we do see relapse rates that are comparable to other diseases. They can range between 60 and 80%, just like diabetes, heart disease, whatnot. So what can we do as a community to make that better? We know that if you have diabetes, we can create sidewalks. We can, do our best to make sure we don't have food deserts. We have environmental strategies to make sure you can manage your chronic illness. So what do we need to do for addiction? And then these are just a few pictures of what's going on. So this is one of our naloxone town hall community discussions where we talk about how to call 911, how to administer naloxone, where to get it, how to get it for free. These are your 7 permanent drop-box sites here in Pasco County, all operated at law enforcement agencies. Obviously, 7 is not enough to serve the 500,000 people here in Pasco County, so we have invested in Deterra bags. So this is a really great partnership that we are embarking on with the Department of Health as well, where you can go to the Little Road office and you will get a free Deterra disposal bag. So making sure that the people who most need to dispose of their medication have access to, and we kind of know our community really well, and the people who are going to the health department are probably the least likely to drive far down the county to dispose of their medications at a sheriff's office. Other people who are targeted for these items are the elderly and people who've previously been arrested. We're also investing in medication storage devices so that you can see the last time you opened your medication. This helps you not only keep you on track to make sure that you take your medication in a timely manner, but it helps you know if somebody is going in there and taking your medication when you don't want them to. This is important for the opioid crisis. It's also really important because we're seeing record high levels of kids attempting suicide with medication. We say this over and over again. If you have a gun at home, you lock up your gun. If you have medication, you have kids in your home, you make sure that's monitored and stored. And then, of course, we work to do our best to reduce stigma. So on the right, that's a proclamation for National Recovery Month. And on the left, these are people in recovery who one of them has had Narcan used on him 7 times. These are people who have had multiple chances and are finally living successful lives in recovery and wanted to thank EMS for saving their lives. This is an upcoming event where if any of you would like to engage with people in recovery, I hope you do. If you want to come to this event, it is on September 22nd. It's at the church, Trinity Church of Christ in Newport, Richey. This is our annual National Recovery Celebration event, a great opportunity to break down the stigma and silos and really show support for people living in recovery and make sure they succeed, make sure they have all the things that they need in order to succeed. We also have our Nope Candlelight Vigil on October 25th. This event is much more focused on making sure we properly honor those who have passed away while also linking people to treatment. So again, another great event. Last year we had 230 people show up for a vigil. I mean, that's not the most exciting event in the world, to come and grieve, but our community is so impacted by it that we had 230 people. Our conference, please save the date. Please don't plan anything for this date. All of you. Okay, so it's May 14th, 2019. It will be at Saddlebrook again. We're very excited. We have a really great speaker whose name is tragically not in my mind right now, but he's a Columbine survivor. So he talks about, his emotional trauma from Columbine, how he became addicted, how he overcame addiction, and is now working as he's a member of several boards for addiction treatment. And then this is, pride and joy, and I know Representative Mariano has had the pleasure to meet some of these students and knows how cool they are. But these are some of our amazing students who help drive our efforts. So students in recovery themselves or students who've experienced addiction from their families, really helping us know what we need to do to make sure to change the culture and make sure that we have a culture of health. And this is them being cool. They won the Youth Outstanding Award from the West Pasco Chamber of Commerce, and then this is them on a podcast. All right, so areas of need moving forward. Our students tell us all the time they need more recovery services. We overwhelmingly focus on adults and not kids. The general mentality among adults is that when kids are dabbling in drugs, that it's a phase. It's not always a phase. The addiction is a child onset disease. They need services as well, so 12 steps for them, etc. We need increased access to health care. So as a county commission, this is something that we can look into without necessarily needing the state. Hillsborough does have their own health insurance plan to help some of the neediest families based on their own monetary system. But basically, if I'm trying to prevent women of childbearing age from having a child being born with going through withdrawal, I need to make sure those women have access to birth control, or I need to make sure those women have access to treatment. The problem is, if they are not already pregnant, they don't have Medicaid. And if they're not already pregnant and using, they're not a priority population. I have no way to, unless they can travel to the health department or Premier, which is far, I have no real way to reach those women before they get pregnant and have a child who is struggling with withdrawal. I'm happy to go into that in more detail, but basically, a lot of the evidence-based strategies that we could deploy to link people to care health insurance or health access is actually required to make sure that that happens. So again, I can go into further detail on that. The next thing, concentrated community healing efforts. Again, we know the zip codes where this is hitting the hardest, and this is going to take a multifaceted approach at schools, at community centers, family level, you name it, but we know the areas in highest need. Housing will always be a huge issue. We have people in recovery who would like to have more affordable housing options with other people in recovery. And then ASAP fundraising. We are entering our last year of federal funds, so we are very much interested in making sure to sustain the efforts that we're already doing, and we are open to suggestions on that. Hint, hint. And then questions.
What I do like that you have the areas of need, and also when it comes to medication disposal, we talk about different silos, and I'm not sure, I'd have to ask Kevin or our fire team, but if you talk to them about having these disposal centers in every firehouse.
Actually, Commissioner Mariano brought that up last time that we spoke, and we've had some discussions about how to do that. The issue isn't necessarily creating the disposal site, it's the removal process. So we just get hung up in that. So it just communicating a little bit more frequently. But if I can rope one of you two into it, I bet we can expedite that process.
I mean, they're here.
Yeah,
I'm sure you
yeah.
can meet with Kevin and,
Tim Rubin said he will handle it personally.
There you go.
Perfect. Look at that.
Just a
That's
thought.
why we
Again,
come to
talk
meetings.
about collaboration, and that's what this is about.
Don't you go to the incinerator, like the sheriff's office, we go in the incinerator, is that what, is that where they go?
Yeah.
So those bags,
Yeah.
those are the charcoal bags that you crush, and you crush the medication in it, and it renders them.
So you don't have to crush them. So basically, you can pour 12 ounces of fluid into them, right? And yep, you just add a little bit of water into it, and it deactivates. Yep. Yep, you can throw it away in your trash. Perfect.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
Well, I just like her last bullet point there, concentrated community healing efforts in the zip codes hardest hit. I mean, those are the schools we should be focusing on, and those are definitely the fire stations we should be really promoting. And I look at that US 19 corridor and just flabbergasted. So we really need to focus on that.
All together, and again, that's why we're here, so.
And Monica, I would like to partner with you on those bottles that are time sensitive with our homebound seniors and whatnot, because again, people forget if they took their medication or not. And that kind of medication, if you double up on it, it's not like doubling up on some minor medication. It can cause an overdose. So you and I will partner on that.
Well, that's a good point. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? So there's a solution.
Right.
What are our
Absolutely.
issues?
Yeah.
We saw the majority of those people were over 70 years old. So there you go. There's a way to dip into that now.
Yeah, we can deliver them right to their homes when we deliver their meals and train them on
But
it.
we came up with a solution.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, hey.
I like it. Thank you, Monica.
Any other
Thank
questions?
you so much.
Okay.
All right.
Like 10 more minutes.
Okay, all right. Last but not least, certainly not least, we are going to hear from Garen Angel, who is the CEO of Magical Butter, and also Dr. Mark Rosenfeld from Ananda Scientific. They're going to talk about the serious role of cannabidiol oil, or CBD, in treating and preventing opioid addiction. So thank you, Garen, for joining us. And we have Dr. Rosenfeld on Skype. Can you hear us, Dr. Rosenfeld?
I sure can.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us.
Wonderful.
I'd rather be where you are than in Utah, which is where I'm sitting right now. So.
So, wonderful. Just a few takeaways from this. Really what I do for a living is strategy. I come up with ways to solve problems, be it for a company or a government. And we've been very successful. We've been very successful through the years doing this. And in listening to today's different accounts of the silos, if you will, there's some things that we see, like working upstream, for example. I'd mentioned this to a couple of county commissioners. Some good friends of mine were with Cambridge Analytica, a very famous data scientist firm at this point. But one of the things that came out of that, they had one program that was philanthropic at Cambridge Analytica. And it was looking at the data science to see who would be predisposed to addiction based on their social media habits. And those resources are available to Pasco County. They're my friends. We can use some of that stuff and be progressive and be really at the head of the pack. What I see in this is we have not had a comprehensive strategy. In 8 years, we've remained at the bottom. And that's not acceptable. And it's not anyone's individual fault. It's a lack of unity or lack of community, whatever we want to call it. And when I look, this is a multifaceted approach. For example, we're here because opiates are a big problem. Well, you're 10 times as likely to be arrested in Pasco County with cannabis than you are with opiates. You're twice as likely than with meth, and you're 6 times as likely than if you do coke. That's a problem, right? So I think part of it is you can't arrest your way out of the problem. We're arresting our way into a problem by selective enforcement of the wrong narcotics, right? If you have something that can't cause an overdose or it's non-lethal, why are we wasting resources prosecuting them when we're in last place in a different category? So to me, that's just, it's alarming statistics that as a strategist I look at and I say, how do we affect change in these areas? One of the big problems, Mike and I had dinner last night, and we were discussing economic development for Pasco County. The problem that's hit the most is 19. It's the only place that has lacked economic development in our county. And so simply shifting some focus back towards the redevelopment of the problematic areas, it will cause new jobs to come in. And as people have jobs, like the judge had mentioned earlier, he does see people who have $100,000 a year jobs plus who wind up in drug court. However, for the most part, those people who are higher earners are functional drug addicts. At least they're not weighing on the system as much. And the first thing we have to do is get the weight off the system so we can start to create a regenerative culture where we're preventing the problem. And when I look at our statistics, I know all of us have said, oh, you're doing a great job, you're doing this, and I'm not saying anybody's not doing a good job, but our statistics don't indicate that we're moving in the right direction. So I, as a resident of this county, am not happy with any of the programs that we have in place. And I think it takes a serious look in the mirror to say, are we doing our county justice by these silos and not having a comprehensive strategy? So we're here today to talk about solutions. I think one of the solutions is to make this meeting frequently. You know, if this is this big of an epidemic, when you look at the numbers, we're tracking 100% above 2017. That's alarming, guys. Like, this needs to be, realistically, almost every county commissioner meeting should segue 20 or 30 minutes for opioid addiction until we get ahead of this. And this is like a cancer patient, right? When somebody has cancer, you're not necessarily trying to resolve the cancer. You're just trying to press pause. You're just trying to buy time. And in this situation, we need to press pause. We need to get people to a point where they're not seeking these drugs. You can't arrest your way out of a problem. If somebody wants to do drugs, they're going to do them. And the only way to do it is to get people to press pause on their desire to do the drugs, and that's through good jobs, education, and community support. It's the same parameters everywhere. Today, we're very fortunate to have one of the top molecular biologists in the world with us. He's one of my colleagues and one of my best friends, actually, Mark Rosenfeld. And just a quick intro on Mark, really fascinating individual. What he does in life is he finds the molecule. He found the molecules that got panda bears to copulate in captivity. The giant panda bear came off the endangered species list in large part due to his discovery. He's one of the inventors of the CA-125 cancer screening test that's still in use today. He's the U.S.'s advisor to the UN on bird flu. Again, he finds molecules. And Mark and I teamed up with Hebrew University and some amazing scientists and doctors around the world, physicians, to bring a specific molecule to the marketplace that looks like it has tremendous application across a lot of different disease states. Some people, right, 80%, I saw the statistic here, 80% of these opioid patients are, opioid addicts are starting with a prescription. Right? We didn't discuss anything about a way to educate our physicians on a way to prescribe alternatives. And really, you have to start at the source, and that's one of the sources. And also, when I look at the statistics here for Pasco, and candidly, I didn't know a lot of them before here, they're broken different age groups. And it's not going to be the same methodology that we apply to that 25-year-old that we'd apply to the 75-year-old. So putting together comprehensive programs that are age-specific, income-specific, and have actual use and utility where we're giving people alternatives to opioids is paramount to get ahead of this. One of the molecules that looks to have tremendous utility for the reduction of opioids is cannabidiol. And Mark, why don't you discuss a little bit about cannabidiol and our early successes to date in human case studies?
Okay. I just want to actually start by saying what Garrett said for a strategy that needs to be taken by Pasco County is actually something that's been taken on by the country of Australia. And next week, I'll be doing a nationwide physician workshop in Sydney, Australia, literally on what I'm about to talk. This is getting traction around the world. I myself, as Garrett stated, is big on public health problems, usually on a large scale. We can actually go to the second slide. The slides are not being projected. There we go. Go to the second slide. Yeah, the first slide everyone got to see. There's no reason to talk. I'm actually going to be talking about cannabidiol, and I want to start by saying very, very safe. Well documented in scientific and medical journals, and as a matter of fact, the World Health Organization has just published its intent to reschedule cannabidiol as a safe compound. The data are summarized here, basically that it's non-psychoactive and non-addicting, and otherwise does not seem to have much of any effect, to include the fact that it's got no noticeable side effects. It's a very unusual molecule. But I want to go right away on the third slide to how opioids and cannabinoids may be related. When you get attachment to the opioid receptor, that attachment by opioids leads to cravings and addictions in many people. It turns out that cannabidiol also binds to the same receptor. And when it does that, it actually tends to reduce the cravings or the individual's demand for opioids. I also want to mention it was brought up under the term emotional dependence, and that is the fact that CBD is a very unusual compound because at the same time that it activates the opioids, it also upregulates, which means it makes the body make a chemical. It upregulates serotonin, which is what makes you feel better. It's the reason why you take, for example, an antidepressant. So for emotional dependence, it would help, it could go far to help. So to summarize, without going into more detail, key advantages of CBD as a potential treatment are that number one, it does not make users high. And otherwise, there are no prospects of any misuse. So what that basically means is that this is worth trying, just from this information alone, and furthermore that there is absolutely there's minimum risk involved. You never say absolutely no risk. Next slide, please. Okay, I listened to your presentation. I do want to mention something. I've actually participated in similar kinds of presentations in Pennsylvania, and so far I actually thought that yours was the most productive, so for what that's worth. But in any case, I'm not going to go over Pasco County statistics. You just spent 2 hours doing it. But here is real data. CBD, okay, what we had done is a series of case study trials in which we took stage 4 cancer patients. And these stage 4 cancer patients were being prescribed fentanyl for breakthrough cancer pain. And when they were co-administered CBD, and the only instruction was for them to take CBD twice a day. What happened is there were voluntary declines or elimination of fentanyl use. In fact, the voluntary declines were greater than 50% across the board, and 25% of patients who were receiving CBD actually eliminated fentanyl use and decided to just continue with the CBD. Why? Because there were no side effects noticeable, and it was controlling pain in its own right. So we had no we had no side effects in the study. Furthermore, another notable consequence, especially in the younger cancer patients, which is where you typically see more of your addiction, although it was interesting to hear you guys talk about post-70 people, 70-year-olds in addiction, which means I have to go to the medical school library thanks to you people today. But in any case, what we found is that not only did they reduce their intake of fentanyl or eliminate their intake of fentanyl, we found no withdrawal symptoms associated with the reduction in fentanyl. And these people have been taking fentanyl for quite a period of time. So the hypothesis now that we're working on is that number one, we can reverse the demand for, the body's demand for fentanyl simply by administering CBD. And secondly, we can actually perhaps use this as withdrawal therapy. That is, CBD becomes administered, and therefore the craving that causes people, the recidivism in opioid abuse, will not occur. Next slide, please. I just want to point out, I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible. I come with human resources that may be of great help, and I offer these to Pasco County. And this is actually just a partial list of the people with whom I work. These people have volunteered to be of any assistance that you wish. In any case, I'll take any questions or otherwise let Garen take over the conversation.
Any questions for Mark? CBD is legal. It can be used. It's farmed under the Farm Act. We work closely with Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul in moving legislation forward to make this federally more acceptable and restore banking to farmers. This is one tool, right? We're here because we don't have a vested interest. We're not being paid anything from Pasco County. We just want to give resources. This is my hometown. It's my county. And it sucks that we're doing so poorly in opioids. And in all drugs, for that matter. It's not opioids, right? And I also own a company called Magical Butter. And from that, we probably have the largest database of individuals who are using cannabis at home. And I can't tell you how many people have went from 20 pills to 2. Now, this is a non-psychotropic option. But cannabis, which let's call this hemp, okay, which is CBD derived, and cannabis, which is more THC derived, they both have utility in battling this because some people enjoy the psychotropic effect. And you're not going to get every addict to buy into the fact that they don't want to walk around high. So if you're going to have an addict walking around high anyway, at least have it be a non-lethal compound. And I'm not here to advocate to move THC forward, right? I'm here to advocate moving CBD forward. I know personally I'll put some money up to help. I've offered that to the county commissioners. We'll give products, you know, and Mark, Mark's a CEO, and I'm the strategy officer of a company that has really tremendous CBD that will be willing to give to the different programs to implement. Let's really come at this as a community where we're giving people alternatives and they realize that we're setting trends. If you want to get an addict to stop being an addict, first you have to give them hope. And if you just put them in the same system that they failed in 10 times, they probably lost their hope. And realistically, I hope that this first workshop, like Mike said, it's almost monthly at this point until we get ahead of this. You know, when I do strategy for a company or a country, we do a conference call at least once a week. And there's an hour-long call, and everybody gets their allotted time to discuss it. But that's how you move projects and programs forward. And Pasco County needs to move forward on this. We can't stay in the last place.
So just to follow up to Commissioner Mariano, so the CBD is derived from the hemp plant, which is the same plant that you find in the health food stores now that a lot of people make their morning smoothies out of, or hemp grass, I guess is what they call it, right? But when they have at the health food store, again, I have the scientist here, so he can answer. It's a little bit different than pulling the oils out, where you're what's what I'm looking for?
Concentrating, maybe?
I guess concentrated, yeah, more highly concentrated to treat versus somebody that goes to the health food store and buys hemp. Again, put in their smoothies or something like that.
Yeah, there's a difference between different CBD manufacturers, both in the chemistry, the efficacy, and the bioavailability. And CBD, for example, has a notoriously low bioavailability. About 5 to 8% will typically get into the bloodstream. So it's a very inefficient molecule in its natural state, even with some carrier oils like you might get at the health food store. To combat this problem, we actually reverse engineered this and got drug delivery involved in it, and now there's novel chemistry that surrounds the molecule and it delivers it into the bloodstream at a 15 to 20x bioavailability increase, which means the patient or the addict can take much less, but have it in their bloodstream longer. It's more stable. It would be like the one example earlier about fentanyl versus when it was not available and they went to heroin in the streets and they didn't have a measured dosage, right? When you combine nanosciences with bioactives or with cannabinoids, now you have a more measurable response rate.
Yeah, let me interject one thing, and that is that from the onset, I've looked at cannabidiol from the perspective of two things. Number one, medicinal development. I'm a molecular biologist. The reason I'm sitting in Utah is I'm former faculty at the University of Utah School of Medicine. I just have never left out of my house. The other part is that there really seems to be a public health imperative, which is why I've made this a major project. But what we do with CBD is to make it real medicine. But everything that we do to make it real medicine is uses what are called RAS, or generally recognized as safe molecules. So in other words, the preparation that we make is highly effective, but also it's non-toxic. And, and that's a hallmark of what we've been able to achieve. And with that, we've brought this to unprecedented levels that's now allowing us to enter into very serious clinical trials.
You made a great point about making this so our
Lean forward a little bit.
the importance for our doctors to get trained, to go through, so they know what to prescribe, what levels to go through. I think it's a very critical thing. So let me just kind of fire a question to Joy, who did the presentation for Baycare. Do you guys use CBD at all?
I thought you said it was in trials. Did you say it was in trials?
No, I said we're entering into serious clinical trials, but we have done case study work. Actually, a fair amount of case study work, both here in the United States, also in Israel.
Yeah, I had a clarifying question for Garen. So just trying to understand what specifically you're speaking to, and obviously we have Epidiolex and Marinol that's FDA approved, CBD derived, highly tested, and then we have the medical marijuana movement, where you have to go through the prescribing doctors and the dispensary. So where does the product that you're discussing in your suggestion fit into these two paradigms?
So Epidiolex is recently approved by the FDA as a CBD medicine. The challenge with it is it lacks bioavailability. So when you look at the clinical studies, without drug delivery, CBD's response rate is erratic. And when you apply drug delivery, it becomes a much tighter standard deviation and mean. What we're talking about here has nothing to do with medical marijuana, nothing to do with medical cannabis. This is an over-the-counter product that can be purchased and implemented into everybody as a dietary supplement. And ultimately, what it appears that CBD does is it decreases the body's inflammation. So when you have somebody, I know that chronic pain was one of the things that was discussed as an entry point for opiates. If we can reduce inflammation, the thought pattern is that we can reduce the pain in the individual, which reduces their need or want for opiates.
Thanks, that helps.
Let me interject, so that there's clarity to this. There really are three things to consider here. Number one, Garen is spot on correct, and as a matter of fact, it was the original reason that I became attracted to cannabidiol, and that is that it is perhaps the most effective anti-inflammatory I've ever encountered. But number two is that it truly does bind to the opioid receptor. With that, it seems to provide some aspect of analgesic relief, either directly or indirectly. I won't go into details. If somebody wants that, I can give that. So that's number two. And then number three, relevant to this discussion, is also at the same time as you're inducing anti-inflammation, as you are providing direct analgesic relief through the opioid receptor, you're also creating an environment in which more serotonin is being produced, so the patient is also feeling better from that perspective. We could talk about a whole host of other possible interactions that may be relevant, but those are probably the three greatest.
So can I ask another question? Sure, go ahead. So doctor, you mentioned in your studies it's been you think it's the best anti-inflammatory you've ever seen. So compare that to like an ibuprofen over the counter, which is
The NSAIDs. Yeah. Well, there's ibuprofen, which actually an ibuprofen to do an effective analgesic, not analgesic, an anti-inflammatory, you have to take 800 milligrams per day, by the way, which is 4 OTC tablets, not 2, just so people know. However, the level of anti-inflammation that you get is minimal relative to what you would experience with cannabidiol. Cannabidiol has an uncanny ability. What it does is the primary, there is a particular protein that is largely responsible for inflammation. That particular protein is directly impacted by the presence of cannabidiol. So what happens is it dramatically reduces in amount, and actually quite rapidly. Versus ibuprofen, all it does is a temporary suppression of that anti-inflammatory. So you don't cure anti-inflammation, or you don't, remove anti-inflammation as a factor in a patient. But in actual, with ibuprofen, so it's chronic use that's necessary there. On the other hand, in the case of cannabidiol, you have prospect of actually eliminating inflammation.
So one more question, follow up. So let's take it to the next level. So what about, let's say, OxyContin?
What about it?
So compare again. So OxyContin is used for what, pain relief?
That's an analgesic, yeah. It's pain relief. OxyContin, it goes, hydrocodone, OxyContin, and then we go up to the wonders of fentanyl. By the way, just want to make a comment because it wasn't made, because you had mentioned OxyContin earlier, but most of the illegal OxyContin, when you analyze it, is actually primarily fentanyl.
Okay.
Yeah, just for point of information. But in any case, OxyContin is, attaches to the opioid receptor, provides analgesic relief. It's as simple as that. It has nothing to do with anything else. It does not make, it makes you feel better from the perspective of pain relief, and it does give you some euphoria that's associated with that, and that's the attraction to people. But on the other hand, it does not provide, serotonin, which is natural feel-good medicine, or natural feel-good, chemical in the body. Nor does it have anything to do with your inflammation. It has zero effect on inflammation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell a little story about myself. I don't know, say 4 or 5 years ago, I had a deviated septum that was blocked 99%. They think it might have been from birth, don't know. But my doctor found it, so he put me in for surgery. Didn't ask me what I wanted for medicine, just prescribed one of the oxycodons. I took it for 5 days. As I was sitting down in my mother's chair, I would take it every 4 hours with Tylenol. And I had a package of crackers that I went through, and I didn't move for like 5 days going through. And I did it the day after a Board of County Commissioners meeting when we had ULI coming in a little bit after that, where we had to do a presentation. So I missed the morning part of the meeting, went to Saddlebrook. In the previous day, I probably called my doctor 10 times because I was running out of pills. I had like 3 pills left. I had 40 hours before I was going to see him again. I already had the gauze taken out of my nose, which is the most painful thing I've ever felt in my life, and I didn't want to go through the same pain taking the splints out that were left behind. So I kept calling him, no, and I'm running out, I need to get these pills. And it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The last time I took a pill was 4 in the morning. And it was like through the time of coming over to Saddlebrook. So he goes, Jack, I hear you called my office continually all day yesterday. What's going on? I said, Doc, I'm running out of pills. You're going to take the splints out tomorrow. My mother's friend told me how painful that was going to be. And go. He says, Jack, I only prescribed you for a few days. I don't know how you got a week's worth of pills, but I want you off those things. I said, but Doc, I says, I'm coming in to see you tomorrow, and I'm going to need to take this out. He goes, Jack, are you in any pain right now? And it struck me. I go, no, I'm not in any pain. But mentally, this thing that gets hooked up in your brain makes you want to take it over and over again. And I tell you, when I heard Ryan Leaf speak, he's a #1 NFL draft pick, went through things between injuries, whatever, he was on those pills. He got hooked on it so bad, the stories he would tell, which I can't wait to have him come to Gulf High, I'm sure he'd like to do, to tell the story, what he went through, I could relate directly to what he was saying and how people get hooked on this stuff. So to me, it's so critical that we actually get this so we help the doctors not only want to prescribe it, but learn how to prescribe it, obviously, make the supply out there so that we can make these things go out there. Because now I'm hearing different data, but for one of the data I heard, if 80% of these people get started by prescriptions, that's where the root is. We need to change that whole dynamic.
I agree. And I think just to wrap up, because I know everybody has time constraints, myself included. My dad's 70th birthday today, so we're here as a resource. We're not here to antagonize the situation. We are here to shine light on things that need lights. But ultimately, how can we help Pasco County? This is my hometown. I'm incredibly successful. And whatever resources this county needs, either professionally or monetarily, let's put stuff in order and start to have a good strategy where we reduce our opioid epidemic.
And we appreciate it. I mean, we could go on with stories, but I've got a veteran family/friend that was prescribed 160 pills a month. Now he went to True Leave. He's got his medical marijuana, which he needs. He should have access to, and he doesn't have the issues. Non-addictive, can't overdose. There's so many things. So it's, as a county, I think, being innovative. We know these things are coming. We know they're coming to the state. It's about, with this trial period, how soon till we can see it to be available? What you're talking about, what the doctor's talking about, to where we can use it here, let's say in Pasco County with medical.
It can be used in Pasco County starting tomorrow.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, if you talk to me, I prefer Mark instead of doctor.
Okay, Mark. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, thank you all. Thank you, Mark, for taking the time. And I think we got a lot of accomplished today. I think we can all agree we have a long ways to go, but I know we're all committed here. I know everyone, that there was no back and forth. Everybody's on, maybe not on the same page, but at the end of the day, everybody cares about our county. It's our county and our residents. So I don't know that I can commit to once a month, but I think we'll send out something to everybody. And it's included that maybe we add some folks. I know some of the city of New Richey is like, hey, what about, we're over here too. We're on 19. We want to talk about it, work together. I didn't even think about that. That makes sense. I don't mind the idea of a task force. I know, Monica, you talked about different task force you have. Maybe that's something we do. Again, I'm on enough task force and boards, but I don't know that there's any board or task force more important than what we can get done today and tomorrow and moving forward, because I can tell you, when we sit down a year from now, I don't think any of us are going to be okay to see these same numbers. We better not see these same numbers, because I know together we can address this, we can fix this, period. So,
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for leadership with the item, as well as from, again, making us make a nice big step of not taking it where our first responders are handing it out, but to actually draw our attention to it. Garen, I want to thank you for bringing this idea to kind of push this envelope through our communications with everybody to make this happen, because I think it is a big step. I really like Garen's idea about having it so it's a report every let's say, meeting to the board, but I don't think we need maybe it's once a month right here in Newport Richey, where most of your abuse is done right here, but I think a monthly schedule, allow 15 minutes, 20 minutes worth maybe. Let's talk about what we're doing, so we keep it on the pulse and watch it every step of the way. And I want to thank you for inviting Representative Mariano and Congress Billarakis as well, because I think we do need the federal and the state people to join with us and use all our ideas, because locally we're doing, we've got some folks, but I think all these silos together, we're going to need those help from the feds and the state with whatever fundings are out there to try to help us, address this.
Absolutely.
It was good to hear that Congressman Billarakis mentioned the funding coming down from the feds to, that'll help out Premier Healthcare, which is great. So I see Mike's.
Mike, did you want to, and sorry we didn't include you, but come forward real quick, Mike, if you could. Tell Mike.
From the state standpoint, DCF should be. I'm Mike Napier, Health Officer of Pasco County Health Department, Florida Department of Health. DCF has funding, and the state is really, when we talk about state funding, has funded it through DCF, so DCF should be here as well. The hospitals all have a vested interest in this, and where we're on, they're the ones that are taking the hospital patients that are coming, so I think having the hospital CEOs come, if we're going to have this as a community effort, it's going to take that level of engagement. They also have money and are interested in investing in upstream to prevent those hospital admissions, so it costs them a lot of readmissions, because they're also charged for readmissions, so I think hospital people could be involved as well. And I think the medical community, your doctors have the hospitals, physician associations, get some of those representatives there, because if we're going to talk about writing prescriptions, then they got to police themselves as well as we try to legislate that. So just a couple thoughts on that.
I guess whoever the representative from the FMA is, I would assume. There's got to be a regional.
Yeah. There's a Pasco County Medical Society.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, so.
Okay. Commissioner.
Just go one more thought as well, talking about doctors. Dr. Reese and Tom Saxon, who did present to the Board of County Commissioners from before, I mean, they're looking to go forward to buy that property. If they haven't closed yet, they're pretty close to closing, so that might be an asset that we can actually look at and kind of help with people that are trying to have a 90-bed facility, if they get a little bit of help to go through, so maybe some help.
Yeah, are they looking at a rehab portion of this?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
Total, the
Total
drug rehab side of it, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, okay. That's probably a conversation to have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all again. With that,
Thanks,
we're adjourned.
Chairman.
Thank you. Okay.